call the tech team. There are 3 people working those lines. If it rings with no answer, please be patient and call again in a few minutes. They are helping other town meeting members. The Q&A tool is only for town meeting members who do not have access to a microphone or for immediate points of order. It is not a chat room. The town meeting will convene at 7 p.m.
Good evening. I'm Mike Widmer, Town Moderator of the Town of Belmont. I'd like to call to order the special town meeting of March 3rd for the Town of Belmont. And thank you all for joining us. We'll begin with as we do, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll now go through some preliminary remarks. First, I'd like to admit to the floor the town administrator, department heads and staff, town clerk staff, town council, warrant committee, planning board. Are there any that I have omitted? If so, please raise your hand. All right, I think that will do it. Let me give a brief overview of tonight. I sent you to town meeting members an email this morning. I said I'm very hopeful that we can do this in one night. It may be a long night, but once we just start discussion of Article 2, I don't want to break it to a second night, so we'll go till we complete it. Article 3 is very straightforward, so it would make no sense to then break between 2 and 3. So we'll do everything we can to complete action in one night, though it may be long. I want to underscore a couple of points. One is remind town meeting members a 3-minute limit on speaking, 2 questions. If you make a motion from the floor, please make the motion and then speak to it. As always, and we've been very successful in doing this, have civil discourse, no personal attacks, can have strong criticism of policies or processes, but please, no attacks on individuals. And then I do want to thank, we had a trial run on the remote meetings a few days ago, and then now tonight, obviously the real thing. And I'm reminded it had been 13 months since last time we did a remote meeting, just how much work it is. So I want to thank Chris, the IT team, Ellen and town clerk's office, James, Belmont Media, and several other people for the great work that they put into making a successful town meeting. And bear with us if we have some hiccups. We'll attend to it and get back to you. A word about future town meetings. Under the legislation state legislation that is allowing us to have this meeting remotely or a hybrid meeting, that legislation expires later this month. So the legislature presumably will act to extend that in some fashion, but certainly that's not assured, and certainly it's not assured that they will act promptly. So unless they do, unless we have the permission from the state legislature, so to speak, the annual town meeting will have to be in person. So I want to be clear about that. It's the state legislature that needs to give us the authorization for a hybrid or remote meeting. So we all do hope that they will act so that we have that option, because I think there's broad agreement that we should proceed with some kind of hybrid meeting. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you. This is my 129th and final town meeting. It's been a distinct pleasure, privilege, and joy to be town moderator over all these years, to work with town leaders, to work with citizens, to work with town meeting members on behalf of the town. We've accomplished a lot in that period. Town meeting has changed dramatically in so many ways from what it was in 2008. So I'm proud of our record in so many respects, but it's been a combined effort on the part of dozens and hundreds of people. And I will work diligently with my successor, if he so chooses, to try to have as smooth a transition as possible following the election on April 1st, and particularly the annual meeting, which will be the new moderator's first assignment. This job is very challenging, and there is a huge amount of planning that goes into it. And I hope you will give the next moderator a little bit of room should he stumble, but do know that I certainly will help be assisting him to the extent that he desires. From my perspective, it is very important to have a smooth transition. This legislative body, pure democracy, going back 400 years, I'm deeply committed to it. I think you town meeting members are deeply committed to it. This is not, as we well know, something to be taken for granted. So in conclusion, I wish us all well, and I hope we can all continue to work together collaboratively on behalf of the town, as we have for so many years, decades, and even centuries. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. Pursuant to the warrant for the special town meeting to be held at 7 p.m. on March 3rd, 2025, I, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, town clerk, do hereby certify that I gave notice of said meeting by posting an attested copy of the warrant and the moderator letter to the select board requesting the town meeting be held by remote participation on the town clerk's official bulletin board, in the town hall, on the town website, and at least 5 other places in town 14 days before the date of this meeting, in accordance with Chapter 39, Section 10 of the General Laws and Section 30-110A of the General Bylaws of the Town of Belmont, and Chapter 22 of the Massachusetts Acts of 2022 as amended. Furthermore, I do hereby certify that I gave notice of the special town meeting of March 3rd, 2025 by causing a copy of the warrant and the moderator letter to the select board requesting the town meeting to be held by remote participation to be sent to the town meeting members at least 14 days before the date of this meeting, and by causing copies of the warrant to be made available at the public website, the town website, and the town clerk's office, and all in accordance with Section 30-110B of the General Bylaws of the Town of Belmont and the Representative Town Meeting Acts of 1926 as amended. Mr. Moderator, may I continue? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Belmont's special town meeting by remote access. Moderator Mike Widmer has asked me to review a few key points regarding the technology in use for tonight's remote access meeting and to get them all on the record. Town meeting members will be using Zoom for video conferencing and Point Solutions for electronic voting. Town meeting members and presenters are the only people in the Zoom webinar. Members of the public are welcome to watch live at belmontmedia.org or on the community access television stations, channel 2130 for HD, channel 28 on Verizon, and channel 8 for Comcast. This town meeting is being televised on Belmont Media, and we're extremely grateful for their help and that, of course, of our wonderful IT partners. All town meeting members, regardless of where they are located, will be voting by Point Solutions, either by their app or by ttpoll.com. Town meeting members who neglect to sign in to their personal Point Solutions electronic voting accounts, instead choosing to use a guest account, are not actually voting in the encrypted secure voting system. On Friday, February 28 at 1:27 p.m., I emailed all town meeting members the Point Solution session ID, a detailed instructions sheet describing how to sign in, and the Zoom link. We hope that everyone will follow those instructions and that all available votes cast can count tonight. We ask all town meeting members to be careful to vote only after the moderator has declared that the polling is open on the motion. Then vote as soon as you can. Check your Point Solutions device for confirmation that your vote has been received. The bubble for your vote choice will appear as filled in. If no bubble is filled in, please vote again and watch for the bubble to be filled in as a confirmation of the vote. The moderator will give a fair warning when polling is about to close. For those town meeting members who are voting at home and who are watching the cable television broadcast instead of being on Zoom, there will be a slight delay in what you see on the television from the live event, but your Point Solutions voting account will open at the exact same time as everyone else. And we will monitor the delay, but we do ask you again to vote as soon as the moderator opens voting. A special note to those remote town meeting members who are choosing only one device to use to watch and participate by Zoom and vote using TT Poll. When it's time to vote, double check that you are on the Point Solutions TT Poll window at the top of your screen by confirming that it actually says TT Poll or Point Solutions, not Zoom, or else no vote will come through for you. Point Solutions electronic voting is the only way to be given attendance credit and to vote routinely tonight. In the event that a town meeting member cannot get their individual Point Solutions account to record their vote, when voting is open and declared by the moderator, that town meeting member should immediately utilize our emergency vote team using the telephone number that I provided to you in Friday's email. Vote with the emergency vote team first, and then call the technology team to try and solve the problem. The phone number was also included in that email for the technology team. Town meeting members who want to speak on Zoom must raise their hand by clicking the raise hand icon at the bottom Zoom toolbar to be recognized by the moderator. Once the moderator invites you by name to speak, our Zoom host will send you an invitation to become a panelist. Please check yes, then unmute yourself and identify yourself by name and precinct. And you may choose at that point if you'd like to allow video. For those Zoomers out there, please don't immediately ask, can you hear me? If we cannot hear you, please rest assured that we will let you know right away. If you're only dialed into Zoom by the telephone numbers, please press *9 to raise your hand or lower your hand to be recognized, and you'll join the line. Town meeting members who do not have a microphone on their computer should use the Q&A tool on the bottom toolbar of Zoom. Type your full name, your precinct, and your full comment or question. A member of our town meeting Q&A team will act as your proxy and tell you who they are. Listen for the moderator to recognize the proxy person who will, on your behalf, read the question or comment exactly as you have typed it. The Q&A tool is not a chat room to express an opinion separate from the meeting itself. Town meeting members who wish to make a point of order remotely should use the Q&A tool on the bottom Zoom toolbar by typing the words "point of order only." A staff person will inform the moderator immediately that there is a point of order. The moderator will call on you to speak, and we caution you that if the moderator is already dealing with a point of order made by another town meeting member, we will ask you to listen to the outcome of that before breaking in with another point of order request. Finally, if the moderator asks for unanimous consent and you choose not to give it, you must immediately use your raise hand function to get the attention of the team and the moderator. In that event, we will be watching for Zoom hands, and during that period, if we see any hands raised, the moderator will instead call for an electronic vote. Let's hope that our night tonight goes smoothly. Though we've had many sessions of this way, it's been a little while, and we appreciate your patience with our remote town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. We now go to testing of our devices, please. Belmont Media. Few more seconds. All right, let's close the polling. And if there are any problems, please let us know. In any case, let's proceed. We have this preliminary motion, which I will read. And this, I think you remember, we need to approve this motion under the state statute to do this remote meeting. Move that the town meeting will meet and act on all matters on the warrant for this special town meeting by means of the video and audio conferencing and voting technologies described in the moderator's February 7, 2025 letter to the select board posted with the warrant. So we will open the polls to vote on this preliminary motion. Thank you. Few more seconds, excuse me, and we'll close. All right, let's close the poll and see the result. Final motion is 196 in favor, 6 opposed. It obviously passes. James, can we scroll the votes briefly? Great. Thank you. Now we go, I believe, to the order of the articles. Town meeting tonight, as I've explained, we'll hear the motions in the following order: 1, 2, and 3. We can continue. The first article is on the reports. There will be 2 brief reports. We go to a vote. Move that the report of the select board and other town officers, any committee heretofore appointed, be accepted. This is a typical vote at the beginning of Article 1. I will ask for unanimous consent. Seeing no hands raised, excuse me, Ellen.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. There's a hand raised by Ann Veely. We should check. Oops, she's just lowered her hand. Perhaps it was a mistake.
Okay, thank you. So this motion is passed by unanimous consent. And so I now turn to the first report under Article 1. Chris McClure, who is our recently hired Chief Innovation Officer and already making an important difference. Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate the opportunity to address town meeting. Just some brief updates on the town website that we introduced at the special town meeting earlier this year. And before I mention that, I just want to mention some housekeeping very quickly. That thank you for all of the attendees. If you have not already, if you could make sure that your first and last name are displaying in your your name so we can easily identify you, and also your precinct number if possible. Also, to clarify, there was some confusion over Zoom and point voting support, that if you have any point questions, to use the Q&A in the Zoom, and we can hopefully get those resolved for you. But I'm pleased to say, and I'm going to share my screen here briefly. That the new website is running well. We're getting some good feedback. We have responded to quite a few requests and reports of the site using the new online form, and we certainly encourage you to continue to use that as the site continues to improve. We are happy to announce that we have loaded all of the agendas and minutes for every committee going back as far as the town clerk's office has records. And you'll notice that we have even linked within those the video for any meetings that Belmont Media has available. So not only now can you access the agenda and the minutes, but where available, you can access the Belmont Media link. We have a lot of other exciting developments on the website coming soon. So stay tuned. We did a couple of press releases, and we have more media planned with Belmont Media and others going forward. And so more specifically to this body, we're also happy to announce that we have now launched a elevated area for town meeting on the website. It's very easy to get to if you simply go to belmont-ma.gov/town meeting. That will take you directly now to the landing page for the town meeting site. We still provide links from the town clerk and the other areas where it lives so that people can find access to that. It now has its own left navigation where we're starting to build out various resources and information for town meeting. In addition, some of the new innovations on the sign up subscriber list, there's an option to sign up for town meeting info. So that's available to the public. So as there's general town meeting information, that will get distributed through that listserv. So anyone can sign up for that, and that information will be available on the website. We've also created a town meeting members listserv that is not available to the public on the website, and the town administrator's office and town clerk's office can use that to communicate through a formal listserv with town meeting members that we will be maintaining as membership updates. So again, I appreciate all the feedback on the website. Always happy to hear comments and questions, so please continue to use the form or reach out to me. Lots more to come, and I'll turn it back now to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Chris. The second report under Article 1 is Elizabeth Dion, who's obviously our Select Board Chair, who's going to give a couple of updates as well as a report on Belmont Center.
Mr. Moderator, if I may, I've been asked to remind town meeting to make a brief announcement that all fields are currently closed due to the mud and ice situation. We are hoping that this will salvage the fields and that they can recover. But again, all fields are closed. Please remind your friends and neighbors of this. And on to my remarks. Good evening. I am Elizabeth Dion, Select Board Chair and Town Meeting Member at Large. I would like to update you on the status of zoning bylaw changes related to Belmont Center that the Planning Board will bring to annual town meeting in May. We are all aware of Belmont's fiscal constraints. In 2024, residents approved an $8.4 million override, the largest in Belmont history. But that override will last only 3 years, at which point we will need to go back to the voters. I cannot guarantee that another override will pass 2 short years from now. I regularly hear from Belmont residents who may have to sell their homes because they can no longer afford their property taxes. The only feasible alternative is to grow our commercial tax base. Businesses consume very few services while contributing to the tax levy through property taxes and other local receipts. The Select Board needed to encumber remaining ARPA funds by December 31st, 2024. Otherwise, we had to return those funds to the federal government. We felt that spending $50,000 on a consultant to draft a Belmont Center zoning overlay was a wise investment that would return many multiples of that money. We also allocated $50,000 to fund a Brighton Street study and $100,000 to fund a comprehensive plan, a necessary step prior to updating the town's entire zoning bylaw to be more business-friendly. All 3 projects are proceeding simultaneously. but we are bringing Belmont Center to you first. Why? Belmont Center is already one of the most studied commercial districts in town, which makes it a good candidate for annual town meeting in May. The proposed Brighton Street corridor is much larger and more complicated. Hence, it needs more time before we can bring it forward for your review. In contrast, the Belmont Center overlay is a continuation of the planning exercise from 2008. Current outreach to residents has validated the ideas presented in 2008, which have held up over time. 17 years later, Belmontonians still want the following elements: maintaining the center's historic character and charm, a wider variety of retail, dining, and entertaining options, adding a minimum of a second level of commercial space, traffic mitigation, and better connections between the Claflin parking lot and Leonard Street. The Planning Board will open the official Belmont Center public hearing on April 15th. However, the following has already happened. On January 22nd, our consultant, Able City, held a workshop with nearly 50 residents, carefully selected to represent a wide variety of interests and views. The next day, Able City met with focus groups to delve deeply into specific topics, such as traffic mitigation, historic preservation, housing, and economic development. On February 12th, Director of Planning Chris Ryan and Planning Board Chair Taylor Gates held a public listening session where residents could respond to initial proposals provided by Able City. If you were unable to attend the February 12th session, I encourage you to watch the recording at Belmont Media Center. On February 25th, the Planning Board received initial height scenarios from Able City. These included a range of options so that the Planning Board and Town Meeting can determine how best to balance concerns of abutting neighbors with our genuine need to grow Belmont's commercial tax base. There will be another public listening session on March 26, which I strongly encourage you to attend. The Planning Board has kept Belmont Center as a standing agenda item, and the formal public hearing will open on April 15th, which you should also attend. In closing, I would like to note the following. Belmont Center is the beginning of our rezoning process, not the end. Redevelopment of the center will not solve our fiscal problems, but it is a necessary first step. Compared to other areas, Belmont Center is the easy one. If we can't reach agreement on Belmont Center, how will we reach agreement on expanding other commercial areas of town? Everyone will have to compromise. But in the end, I think we can have a charming town center that both provides desirable amenities for residents and boosts the town's commercial tax base. The Select Board and Planning Board are committed to a fully open, transparent, and timely process. In contrast to the MBTA Communities Act and ADUs, both of which were driven by state mandates and timelines, we control the Belmont Center process. We should have all necessary information ready for you by May Town Meeting, including timely delivery of documents. Finally, I once again encourage you to review past and current information posted on the Planning Department website. Please attend the upcoming information session on March 26th and the Planning Board hearing on April 15th. Local zoning changes require a 2/3 vote of town meeting. Decisions about Belmont's future rest with each one of you. We look forward to working with you to craft a Belmont Center overlay that meets residents' needs and improves town finances by bolstering our commercial tax base. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dion. I want to underscore one point that Ms. Dion made, and that is we're going to be making sure that we, being town leaders, and we'll be having a meeting among the leaders in March to set out a schedule and timeline to make sure that we get information, as she said, in a timely manner to town meeting members, so that you don't receive a large package on the Friday before Monday town meeting. But thank you. We now turn to the motion. Move that Article 1 be laid on the table. I'll accept unanimous consent. Seeing no opposition, thank you. The motion is adopted unanimously. We now turn to the main item of our business tonight, Article 2, zoning changes on accessory dwelling units. and I'll introduce, I think Taylor Yates will be making the motion, and then he and Chris Ryan will be making the presentation. Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board and Town Meeting Member from Precinct 2. So move to amend the Belmont zoning bylaw by adding a new section 6.14 pertaining to accessory dwelling units and making related changes to sections 1.4, 3.3, 4.3.5, and 6.11 as printed in Appendix B of the warrant for this town meeting dated February 25th, 2025.
And the select board voted unanimously, 3-0, and Taylor, the planning board vote.
The planning board voted 5 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstentions.
Great, thank you. Please proceed with the presentation.
Okay, so I know far be it for me to gainsay Mike Widmer, but I actually think that there's a good chance that this can be a pretty smooth town meeting tonight. So we're going to be talking about ADUs and allowing them by right in Belmont. Next slide, please. So what is an ADU and why are we doing this bylaw amendment? So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, and the simplest way to think about it is that it's a small apartment attached to a primary home. Imagine like a carriage house or an in-law apartment. Those are types of ADUs. And in 2024, Massachusetts passed the Affordable Homes Act to, among other things, allow ADUs by right in single-family districts. So I'm going to say this now, and I'm probably going to repeat it a few more times tonight. We are not deciding whether or not to bring ADUs to Belmont. They are allowed by right as of February 2nd, 2025. So no matter what we vote tonight, you all could go to the Office of Planning and Building tomorrow and demand a building permit for an ADU. What we are doing tonight is working on our zoning bylaws so that the Office of Planning and Building has a framework to decide who gets a building permit and who does not, as well as bring our bylaw in compliance with the state law. Next slide, please. So these are a few of the form factors for ADUs. So again, I mentioned there's there are interior ADUs like an in-law suite, either in the basement, attached to the home, up in the attic. You could do a garage conversion or build above your garage. And then of course you could have a detached ADU, which can just be on the same lot, a building unto itself. Next slide, please. So Chris, why don't you walk us through this part? Is Chris right on? Do you have Chris Ryan?
Yeah, we just promoted him. Just give him a second.
Okay, thank you.
I'm on now, hopefully. Okay. Let me just talk a little bit about the basics of the law. A single protected use ADU, which is how the state defines it, can be established by right wherever a single family home can be built. ADUs must maintain a separate entrance, be no larger than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller, meet reasonable town restrictions, such as setback height and bulk restrictions that do not conflict with the law, and impose site plan review in appropriate cases. Also, we must avoid prohibitions and unreasonable regulation, very clearly spelled out in the state law. We cannot require owner occupancy of either unit, either the principal dwelling or the ADU. We cannot impose discretionary review standards, can't require more than one parking space outside of the transit zone or require any spaces within, must allow both ADUs attached, integrated into principal dwelling, and detached ADUs, We cannot allow bylaw provisions that result in nullification of the use or development of protected use ADUs. And we cannot impose dimensional standards such as setbacks that are more restrictive than that required for the principal dwelling or accessory structure, whichever results in more permissive regulation. Next slide. Go ahead, Taylor.
Sorry. Okay, so where does this? What parts of town does this affect? Like, where is the state law applicable? So anywhere a single family is allowed by right or by special permit, which includes the vast majority of Belmont's residential areas and even a little bit beyond that. So that is the single residence A, B, C, and D districts, the general residence district, and even local business 1, 2, and 3. And again, that's because even though some of these districts are mostly multifamilies or even commercial, single family homes are allowed by special permit in those districts. And so an ADU is allowed by those in those districts. There's two things to call out here. Again, number one, multifamily districts could also have an ADU if single families homes are allowed within them. So if you have a triple decker and you have a lot that otherwise allows an ADU, one can be built there. Number two, in order to build an ADU in a local business district, you must first build a principal dwelling. So you can't build an ADU that's attached to like a shop or a restaurant. And there has to be a primary home there. Next slide, please. So what are we trying to do? Again, so what we are not doing tonight is deciding whether or not to allow ADUs, and we're actually not even really making many policy choices about ADUs. We're just trying to comply with the state law and provide the Office of Planning and Building with a framework that they can use to manage ADUs in Belmont. There are a couple of things that conflict with ADU with the state law, in particular that currently ADUs are only allowed by special permit in the things in the historic district, which obviously does not comply with state law. If we pass this article tonight, this will save us a lot of time and potentially legal costs, because right now, as things stand, if we don't pass something tonight and someone goes and asks for a building permit for an ADU, Chris and Ara will have to make a judgment call about whether or not to issue it. And that judgment call will probably involve a consultation with town council, which means we're spending money on legal costs and taking up their time on something that we don't have to. And if we get it wrong, we create legal risk for the town. Again, this article is first and foremost an administrative exercise. Next slide, please. So a few things about the chronology. So the state law was passed last year on August 5th. The planning board started considering draft regulations around mid-December. We opened the public hearing back in January. We did a few revisions over the course of January and February, and including a number of kind of clerical changes from Bob McGaugh. And then finally, we voted on the amendments on the article and amendments on February 25th. After February 25th, there was some clarification that came from town council, but no substantive changes to the article. Next slide, please.
So I'll pick it up from here again. How does Belmont's bylaw differ from the state requirements? Not a lot. We do have a 5% lot coverage maximum bonus that we feel that if anybody needs to build a detached ADU or need to build out their primary dwelling, this may facilitate that. Also, commensurate reduction in open space equal to the maximum bonus for the lot coverage. And then some definitions, most that we have align with the state law. Some retain the town's existing definitions, and some state definitions were not included because they were not considered necessary. Next slide. Setbacks and other dimensions. So the state law is clear that standards for dimensional requirements for ADUs, such as setbacks, must be set to the most permissible level in the bylaw. This means that if the bylaw set an accessory building setback at 5 feet, we could not have a greater setback for ADUs in accessory buildings. Required setbacks for the principal dwelling, the main house, will be used for building additions, establishing a protected use ADU in that dwelling. So in summary, Belmont's bylaw requires setbacks for ADUs as part of a principal dwelling to use those principal dwelling setbacks as per table 422, and ADUs established as or within accessory buildings to use the accessory building setbacks as per section 435. Next slide. This just shows the 5% lot coverage bonus. You can see that the different districts are in the first column, and the lot coverage that relates to those districts is in the third. And then with an additional 5%, you can see what the additional maximum lot coverage for ADUs would be in the final column. So it's 5% across the board. Next slide. Good deal.
Okay, so what are the impacts on Belmont? So the most honest answer is we don't know. One of the reasons that the state passed this law is that towns around us take a very restrictive approach to ADUs. And so there's no like comparable town where we could say, well, this town offers ADUs by right. And so we're probably going to end up like them. However, we were encouraged to sort of make a ballpark estimate for you all. And we have very roughly used a model to kind of get as best we can to provide you with some estimated impact. There were 4 areas that came up that were of concern to a lot of folks. One is traffic, 2 is parking, 3rd is stormwater, and finally schools. So traffic, we think that because ADUs are very small, it likely reduces their car ownership rates among ADU occupants. Again, I'm going to emphasize this and probably every other point. This is our best guess. Parking, same reason. ADUs are relatively small, so we expect lower car ownership rates. Stormwater, there will be some additional lot coverage, but all new developments have to comply with the stormwater bylaw. And then finally, what's the impact on schools going to be? We don't know, but again, because they're relatively smaller, our best guess is that ADU family sizes will skew smaller. Next slide, please.
So the next 3 slides are just from the rough estimate based on a model tool that we used. We're not going to go over them in detail. They're available in your packets, but we just wanted to give a sort of a snapshot of what the tool suggested could be based on the numbers that were sort of a median based on the different districts that we had. So you can skip this slide, the next slide, and the third, and go on to the question slide. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to loop back. I overlooked one thing, and that is, I did mention it in my email to town meeting members this morning, and that is Belmont has a bylaw that requires disclosure of any financial interests. And that clearly applies to real estate agents and developers. So Mr. Yates, I go back and ask if you could make that disclosure.
Yeah, apologies, Mike. Yes, I disclose I am a real estate agent.
Thank you, Taylor. Well,
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, at this time, there is only one person in line who is Sue Croy, a town meeting member, with her hand raised.
Ms. Croy.
Hello. Suzanne Croy, Precinct 6 town meeting member. After much thought, I move to postpone this Article 2 indefinitely, but I wish to have it brought back to the annual town meeting in May 2025.
Is there a second? Somebody want to raise their hand? Yes, there is a second. You may now, Ms. Croy, speak to your motion.
I definitely appreciate all the hard work of all those involved with this article. I have followed many of your meetings, and I really do appreciate all the work. However, since receiving the 14 documents this past weekend, I've received multiple phone calls and emails about the changes of which we were unaware. There have been changes to the ADU zoning bylaw language that seem minor, but could have substantial and far-reaching effects on many residents of Belmont, specifically the rear and side setbacks on all by right ADUs were reduced to only 5 feet. Throughout the public hearing process, setbacks had been referenced instead to those of the principal dwelling unit, which are significantly larger than the current bylaw, 10 to 15 on the side and 20 to 40 on the rear for dwellings. While state law requires inclusion of accessory building setbacks as allowable for ADUs, it does not require a 5-foot setback, and alternatives, including modifications to the baseline zoning and possible other options, could ensure compliance with fewer impacts on residents. The modified text was provided to town meeting members only days ago, and the public has not had an opportunity to discuss these implications because and explore alternative compliance options with the state law that avoid such significant reductions in setbacks. Postponement will allow time for this critical issue to be addressed. I do not want to get rid of the article. I would like to have more time for both the planning board and the community to be involved in what this change of setbacks will really mean for our community. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, there are 4 people with their hands up. The first 3 are Lisa Pargoli, Vincent Stanton, and Angus Abercrombie.
Pardon me, I didn't unmute. Let me stress that we are discussing Ms. Croy's motion on postponement. So we are not discussing the pros and cons of the amendment on the main motion, but the pros and cons of postponement. With that, I'll call on Ms. Pargoli.
Hello? Hello?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, sorry. Thank you. Lisa Pagoli, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Member. I know I had my hand up as I was listening to Taylor discuss the ADUs. And I had a question. The one thing I'm a little haven't heard anything about is they want to do all of these ones. How would we go? Where's the revenue? Where's the interest? I mean, their dwellings and the ones that are in somebody's basement. How would these be evaluated or assessed for property taxes?
Ms. Pargoli, let me defer that question and see whether we continue on the overall, whether we postpone or continue on the main motion. But I'll recognize you if we do continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angus Abercrombie.
Angus Abercrombie, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, the motion to postpone indefinitely is one that I find often comes up at these meetings and ends up being more of a confusing force than a helpful one and quickly dispensing with our business. In terms of the merits of postponement to the annual meeting or whenever this comes back, I think there's been an immense amount of work and public process that's gone into this. And, frankly, it is unwise for us to proceed for months in a state of semi-compliance with state statute. It's work that we need to do, that we're here to do now. And I hope that through the few amendments proposed tonight and through a lengthy debate, we can come to the right conclusion. But if by the end of the night, my colleagues believe that this is not fit for discussion now, we can always vote no. We can always vote no. But a motion to postpone consideration at this time misses out on an opportunity to discuss this really key issue and to take action on it preemptively before we begin having legal problems for the town. So I strongly urge that we reject this motion to postpone indefinitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yates.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, I just, in no uncertain terms, think that indefinite postponement is neither wise nor necessary, for a few reasons. Number one, the premise is flawed. There were no changes to the setbacks. We discussed these, back at least February 4th, we discussed these 5-foot setbacks. Second, this is not like a choice that we made or a change that we made in our bylaw. This is how the state law works. They define accessory dwelling units as accessory buildings when they are detached from a home, and therefore the accessory building setbacks apply. They also say that you can, so the accessory building setbacks apply. Finally, I want to talk about the process that we went through to get here, and then what might change if we were to postpone indefinitely. So we had a very lengthy public process. Any of you who attended those meetings will know that we were in those planning board meetings frequently and late into the night. These included a line-by-line review with town council of the bylaw in a public hearing. And so if we were to postpone indefinitely, we would basically just bring you the same text in the spring. And so we gain nothing and we lose just the legal certainty that would come from this. And frankly, the staff efficiencies that we would gain from implementing this. So I don't know what the goal would be of postponing indefinitely.
Mr. Moderator, we have a point of order from Bob McGaugh.
Mr. McGaugh? Mr. McGaugh, did you have a point of order?
Yes, I did. The motion was made to postpone indefinitely.
Bob, can you identify yourself, please?
Oh, yes, I can. I apologize, Mike. I am Robert McGaugh. It is Precinct 1.
Go ahead and make your point.
The motion was to postpone indefinitely and to postpone to annual town meeting. Those are inconsistent motions. If it's postponed immediately.
Bob, let me interrupt. The motion was made to postpone indefinitely. She expressed a desire to have it come back at the annual town meeting. So they're not in conflict.
I have a question then. If it's postponed indefinitely, that would kill the amendment. Could it be reintroduced at town meeting, or is it subject to the delay?
Reintroduced at which town meeting, Bob?
The annual town meeting.
Yes, I mean, the select board has total power to put and responsibility to put the warrant together. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's get back to speakers. Jack Weiss.
Jack Weiss, Precinct 1. Sue's rationale was setbacks, and I just have a question of understanding. I wasn't reading the materials for this, but do I understand it correctly that the 5-foot setback applies to accessory structures that are already there and present on the site? If somebody wants to build a new ADU, that ADU would then need to apply to the regular setbacks? Is that correct?
Mr. Weiss, I'll let Taylor respond to this, but I remind you and others that we're discussing the motion to postpone, but this question the answer to it may help people decide whether to postpone or not. So I will allow that, but I remind people we're discussing postponement, not the specifics.
And
Mr. Yates.
that's the context, because the rationale was the setbacks issue. So trying to understand.
Right. I appreciate that. Yes. Mr. Yates.
Sure. Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. Do you want me to? So I didn't understand later, Mike. Should we answer the question or should we not answer the question?
Yes, please. Yeah, no, please answer the question, Mr. Yates.
Yeah. Chris, feel free to hop in, but it's even a new ADU would have the 5-foot setbacks because it counts as an accessory building in our bylaw. Because the state counts it as an accessory building, the accessory building setbacks in our bylaw apply.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael McNamara.
Michael McNamara. Oh, hold on one moment. Okay, never mind. It won't show my screen. But Michael McNamara, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. A little bit of a delay. Michael McNamara, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. I just wanted to say that I have not heard in any point in any email that this motion to indefinitely postpone had been brought up at any point prior to right now. So if an original person who had made this motion to dismiss or indefinitely postpone, pardon me, is complaining about process and complaining about, well, things were changed last minute. This is the first time as a town meeting member I've heard anyone mention this at all. So this is literally last minute, this motion to indefinitely postpone. So I would argue for town meeting members, if you're worried about process, this move to indefinitely postpone was also not telegraphed. So it makes me question the purpose of this other than to either dismiss or otherwise derail attempts to have the ADUs comply with state law. So I would urge all town meeting members to vote against this effort to indefinitely postpone. There's no transparency on this at all. I did not hear about this anywhere in any email or any other communication until right now. So I'm asking people to please vote down this effort to indefinitely postpone. Thank you.
I might make one comment here. Obviously, I rarely get involved in the debate, and Mr. McNamara is making a fair point, or at least a fair point as he sees it. On the other hand, I just want to underscore that the rules of Belmont Town Meeting and town meeting time give Ms. Croy or any other member of town meeting the right at any time to make a motion to postpone or any of another dozen motions. So it's just, I want to underscore this is consistent with the rules of town meeting time. That's the only thing I want to say.
I completely understand.
Yes.
I just mean with regard to if you're complaining about process and then springing something on town meeting without further commenting beforehand and telegraphing the message, that feels a little backwards, especially.
I understand your point, Michael. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. At this time, there are 14 people with their hands raised. First, Joe Wright, Vincent Stanton, and then Liz Allison.
Joe Wright, you're next.
Hello, Joe Wright, town meeting member, Precinct 1. I rise to oppose this amendment. I, too, am concerned about the setbacks. I think that they are too restrictive. But this is not the time to argue the details of this. That can be engaged in further work. Ultimately, this vote tonight is about complying with state law, and I, personally could add different things to the primary motion, but I think ultimately we simply need to vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince Stanton, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vincent Stanton, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. While I appreciate Ms. Croy's concern about the complex implications of this amendment to our bylaws, something that was also acknowledged by Mr. Yates in his comments that the implications of this were a matter of guesswork because there aren't precedential communities. Nonetheless, I think it would be better to say that town meeting members or town residents more generally are digesting the implications of the state law, because as we just heard from Mr. Yates in his answer to a previous question, the 5-foot setbacks are part of the state legislation that we are simply aligning Belmont's bylaw with. And so with that perspective, I don't think it's fair to, I think it's incorrect to lay any blame on the planning board or Mr. Ryan for not preparing us. This is, first of all, the state law was just passed, so this is actually very quick. And second, as I say, it's really the state law that we're having difficulty digesting, and what we're doing here, I think Mr. Yates was fair in characterizing it as more clerical in nature. I will be voting against the motion to dismiss.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Liz Allison, you're up.
Liz Allison, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I am in favor of postponement to the fall town meeting. I believe it would provide time to greatly improve the analysis of the fiscal impact on Belmont. As I look at what has been presented, I think it clearly underestimates the costs of these ADUs and perhaps underestimates the revenue, but certainly underestimates the cost seriously. And since Belmont's fiscal problems are probably the hardest problem the town has to deal with, I think understanding how deep a hole we're going to be digging with this, understanding that we have no choice to dig this hole because the state requires it, but it's still good. It would be much better to have a better understanding of how much this will increase the structural deficit of the town.
Thank you. Doug Koplo.
Doug Koplo, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I rise to support the motion to postpone. I spent a huge amount of time reviewing the ADU bylaw language, and I'm supportive of what it is doing. I also attended or reviewed all of the meetings. I do think there are significant process issues here. On the February 4th meeting that was referred to as clearly stating a 5-foot setback. There was actually a quote at the 24:40 47 seconds saying that there are dimensional requirements. Many of them are the same, but it emphasizes that the ADU shall be subject to the height and setback requirements applicable to the structure in which the principal dwelling is located. We've really not seen this issue of the 5-foot setbacks being clearly delineated. It will have a huge impact. and it is not required by state law. In many other parts of the ADU bylaw, we had to make modifications to the baseline zoning and in order to reach the goals of the policy change. This should have been also done for the 5-foot setbacks, but was not. I think that postponement would allow these impacts to be mitigated tremendously for residents, and I think that's what should be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Marie Warner, Precinct 6. I rise in support of postponement of this article. Really in a process reason, town meeting members received amended documents regarding this article. After the date, we could submit an amendment to it. So I think that for that reason, as well as those highlighted by Mr. Koplow, that we should plan to support this, but plan to review it in the annual town meeting and vote yes on postponing it for voting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman, the town clerk. There are 12 people with their hands raised. First, Adam Dash, Paul Joy, Stephen Rosales, in that order.
Thank you. Mr. Dash.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adam Dash, Precinct 1. I'm also a zoning attorney who handles work with development. I just want to make clear, I don't know if anyone's actually said this, I don't think so, but the ADU law is already in effect at the state level. So that went into effect last month. Somebody could come in at any time in Belmont and file to build an ADU by right. The problem is our zoning bylaw is not in conformance with the state law. So I don't really think it's prudent to wait on this. We put ourselves in legal jeopardy if we wait on this, because somebody could file for an ADU by right tomorrow, and then we're going to be in a bit of a pickle, particularly if the neighbor says, oh, I'm going to take this to court because the bylaw in Belmont says this and the state law says that, and then we end up spending a ton of money on legal fees. I think Taylor Yates said it earlier, we're not really debating the policy here. That was done at the state level a while ago. We're just trying to make our zoning bylaw jibe with the state law that's already in effect right now. I'm working on some projects with people in other communities to get ADUs done by right. It's already happening. So we're behind the curve. Putting it off until any date in the future is just adding to the jeopardy for something that we're not really able to change, whether we like it or not. You don't have to like this. It's sort of like the MBTA Communities Act we talked about the last town meeting. It's already been done at the state law. Our job is just to make sure that our laws don't conflict with it. So for that, I oppose putting this off and postponing it. We need to do this, and we need to do it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Joy.
Paul Joy, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. Mr. Moderator, I rise to support postponing Article 2 to the annual town meeting in May 2025. This isn't just about ADUs, it's about a planning board process and a chance to strengthen on our overall compliance. And frankly speaking, Ms. Croy is right. On February 25th, after the warrant closed, ADU setbacks fell to 5 feet, 50 to 87% less than what was promised, with no public debate or any explanation. The planning board itself didn't even have the time to discuss these detailed changes. We expected setbacks tied to principal dwellings 10 to 15 feet on both sides, 20 to 40 foot in the rears, not a last-minute shift to accessory dwelling structure rules that have frankly blindsided all of us. Postponing to May ensures that we stay compliant while giving the planning board time to fix and analyze the fiscal impact on Belmont properly, with the cost to our budget, our infrastructure, and other key considerations. Postponing Article 2 because we deserve compliance with clarity, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Rosales.
Good evening. Steve Rosales, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I rise to support the motion to postpone hopefully just to town meeting 2 months from now. I do on a variety of reasons. One is the late notice of the setback. Two is of the telling answer to prior speaker, the presenter, as to what the effect on Belmont would be. And the answer that I thought I heard was, we don't know. Well, that's not really good enough for me to vote on. I'm not going to vote blind. But what most bothers me on this is that this is a major change to what can be done with our town of Belmont. I've been here since the first grade at Winbrook, and I understand things change. I can appreciate that. The only thing for certain is change. However, to consider and vote and force a vote on something that could have a major implication in the way things are done in town, the town finances, the town density, the town parking, and perhaps conflict from neighbor to neighbor, to be done in a Zoom call in the middle of the night, I don't think is fair to the presenters, to the people that are either in favor or opposed, or mostly to the citizenry of the town. When we are live and in person, the citizens can tune in and can see if their elected officials, town meeting members and elected officials, are actually have their butts in the seats and are exposed to the debate. Sitting here now, it's hard enough. My eyes glaze over. It's just, you see an article, the PowerPoint, you see tiny little 1-inch people and sometimes names. And it's just not effective. You can't look at people in the eye. You can't persuade people. People don't know who's even there. People don't know where people are. I'm sitting in my living room, and that's pretty convenient. But for all those reasons, town meeting in May, live in person, is the preferable way to discuss these and the proposed amendments.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. We have a point of order from Mary D. Lewis.
Go ahead, Ms. Lewis.
I said.
One moment.
Can you raise your hand, Mary? Just want to make sure I find you here.
Yes, to people that know everything. No.
You got her? Okay, there she is.
Hello.
Oh, I think we got you, Mary. Go ahead.
Yes. Mary Lewis, Town Meeting, Precinct 1. Many of these comments are out of the scope of the motion to postpone. We are not discussing fiscal impact of ADUs. The law
Mary,
yes, I'm
Mary,
sorry. We have a long night in front of us, and I would like us to stay to scope.
They are not out of scope. I understand you're raising the issue. They are not out of the scope. It's perfectly appropriate to make the argument that Miss Allison made, which you cited. Perfectly appropriate to make the argument that we don't know the fiscal impact and we should, therefore we should put it off. The arguments that people have made pro and con of this motion are within scope. So let's proceed.
Well, I disagree, but thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mary. I'll turn to Roy Epstein. He has his hands.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roy Epstein, sorry, member of the Select Board and town meeting member from Precinct 6. Let me say first that I sympathize with all town meeting members about getting so much information kind of late in the game on Friday. But let's ask what difference does it really make? And I was listening carefully to Sue Croy, and it sounds like, frankly, there's been some confusion about the particular issue of setbacks. The setback language of 5 feet side and rear has been in the draft bylaw language since February 4th. It's never changed. And if somebody misspoke verbally in a public hearing, well, that's unfortunate, but the language of the bylaw never changed. And as I understood the introductory comments, the ADU as an accessory building cannot have anything less restrictive than what's in the current zoning, and the current zoning is 5 feet for accessory buildings like a garage. So let's just keep in context, even if we came back in May or came back in any other time, the setback would be exactly the same, because in effect, the state is saying you've got 5 feet now, it's got to be 5 feet. There's no real dispute here. It's been 5 feet all along, and that's what we need to vote on.
Thank you, Ellen.
Did you want to talk to her? Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman. At this point, there are 12 people with their hands up. Ada Batista, Roger Rubel, and Zhong Yue are the first three.
Mr. Baptista.
Adam Batista, town meeting member, precinct 3. I oppose this motion. At best, it feels like a way to debate this without debating. I think that we're here as town meeting members, elected by our constituents, to debate the actual articles that present to us. We should actually have the debate, have the conversations, work to make sure we understand the law and what's actually being presented to us and what we have to vote on, and then have the vote, and maybe possibly even vote on some of the amendments as well. I think we should do the hard work to do that. That's what we're elected to do. So I strongly oppose this, and let's get to work.
Thank you. Ann Mann.
Hi, Ann Mann, Precinct 4. I want to state that I'm a realtor before I start speaking. I reject the motion to postpone. I believe that we should be able to discuss the ADUs this evening. That full disclosure, there are some clients that I have that have elderly parents that they are concerned about. They would like to have them on their property and to take care of them as they age. And if we delay this, and it's delaying them being able to be with them. I trust our town meeting members that are elected to represent their communities. I think that we are smart enough to be able to listen to the discussion this evening and make a decision based on the facts that are given to us and actually somewhat presented right now in the discussion of this motion. So I'm hoping the rest of you will reject the motion to postpone, and let's hear it out and have a discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anne Marie Mahoney.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Anne Marie Mahoney, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I support the postponement of this article. In all the years I've been in town meeting, I think this is one of the most complicated and confusing zoning articles that I've experienced. This is March 3rd. We've only been hearing about this in presentations and written material since the middle of January. I've been paying attention, I've been watching the meetings, but we got 14 documents on Friday for us to digest. Here we are on Monday. We haven't had not much of an opportunity to talk to our constituents, to really analyze all of the material we've received. I'm hearing conflicting information from various boards. I certainly respect Mr. Dash's take on this and several of the other speakers. However, I think that zoning has long-term and permanent effects, and that we should take the extra 2 months to really digest this and understand what we're voting on. I get that it's the state. I get it. But frankly, I'm tired of the unfunded state mandates, and I want to take my time to understand what I'm voting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman. At this time, there are 12 people in line. Roger Rubel and Jung Yue and Corinne McHugh Olmsted are the next 3.
Roger, go ahead.
I'd like to call the question. Roger Rubel, Precinct 5. I call the question.
Mr. Rubel calls the question. Is there a second? It's so now, James. So the motion by Mr. Rubel is to end debate and vote. So on the motion to postpone. So this is whether you favor terminating debate on this motion to postpone. If you favor it, then and majority, then we will go to a vote on the motion. If more than a third opposes the termination, we'll continue the discussion. And Ellen, how many are in line?
Mr. Moderator, there are 9 people with their hands up.
Great, thank you. So now let's go to the motion to terminate debate on the postponement. Polls are open. And as we know, that takes 2/3. Okay. All right, a few more seconds here, and then we'll display the tally.
And Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman,
Yes.
we are hearing that there are emergency votes coming in on this. So we should not call the result until after we have completed those.
So we won't show the tally until we receive the emergency votes, please. I think we can show the tally now, and then. So the tally is 168 in favor, 52 opposed, 1 abstention. Ellen, what are the emergency?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. At this point, there are 2 noes, Suzanne Croy and Ted Dukas. There is 1 yes from Carol Williams.
So screw this. Obviously, this is more than 2/3. So we'll go to a vote on the motion to postpone. So could you show the tally again, James? So at this point, they're 168, 170. Uh, 2 no's and 1 yes. Was that correct, Ellen? So it's 169, 54. Well, wait, there may be another vote. So we need to get a final vote here, and then we will go to a vote on the motion itself to postpone. Phone keeps ringing. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead, Ellen. Is there more? These are not determined. All right, so I guess we have the final tally is 169 in favor of terminating debate, 54 opposed, 1 abstention, obviously more than 2/3. So with that, I want to be clear, we are now going to the motion to postpone. Ms. Croy's motion to postpone indefinitely. If you favor the motion to postpone, vote yes. If you oppose the motion to postpone, vote no. Polls are open. Thank you. Let's show the tally on the motion to postpone. 65 in favor, 160 opposed, 2 abstentions. The motion fails. I think we have a few other late votes, emergency votes, which obviously won't change the outcome. So as I laid out in my memo this morning, and as we traditionally do, we will now turn to the three amendments. Once we complete this final vote here, we'll start with Paul Joy's amendment and then Rachel Heller's two amendments. Once we dispose of them, we then go back to the main motion as amended. Are there any subsequent votes here, Ellen?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. There are 6 votes for yes by Tommy Olson, Ted Dukas, Carol Williams, and did I say Tommy Olson already? There's actually only 4, and Suzanne Croy. And there are no votes, 1, 2, 3 of those from Elaine Alligood, who called twice, and Rafi Manjikian, so there's only 2. So there's additional 4 yes, 2 no. And now we have another one, Brian Keefe votes no. So 3 no, 4 yes, additional.
So the final tally then, for the record, is 68 in favor. 164.
Yes, 4.
168 in favor, 164 opposed, 2 abstained. So with that, we now go to the motion being defeated. We go to the First Amendment, and this is Paul Joy's amendment. Mr. Joy?
Mr. Moderator, I move to withdraw my amendment, the Joy Amendment, as revised under Article 2.
Is there a second? Yes. So any discussion on Mr. Joy's amendment to withdraw? We'll go to a vote on the motion. All those in favor of withdrawing the amendment, please vote yes. Those opposed, no. Polls are open. We don't need to.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, we have a point of order from Ada Baptista.
Yes, Mr. Baptista. Go ahead.
I had my hand raised. I wanted to understand why it was being withdrawn. What's so we can effectively vote correctly.
Well, at this point, I think we're voting. So
yeah, I had my hand raised though. So.
Well, I'll call. I think at this point we'll just complete the voting. I mean, if the proponent wants to withdraw, I think it's.
Right, just wanted to know why. Yeah, but I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Ada. All right, is it Belmont Media? All right, let's show the tally here. All right, 183 in favor, 17 opposed, 21 abstentions. Anything?
Ellen O'Brien Cushman, town clerk. There are 3 votes to withdraw: Ted Dukas, Tommy Olson, Carol Williams.
All right, scroll this and then Right, so the final tally is 186 in favor, 17 opposed, 21 abstention. So Mr. Joy's amendment is withdrawn. We now turn to the second amendment, Rachel Heller's first amendment. Ms. Heller.
Good evening. I am Rachel Heller, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. For disclosure purposes, I want to start by telling you that in my day job, I lead a statewide affordable housing organization. I receive nothing for my work in Belmont. My work in town is completely voluntary. I've been in touch with the moderator who tells me I do not have to disclose this under our bylaws, but I'm doing so because my amendments fine-tune the proposed bylaw to make it easier for homeowners to create ADUs. ADUs have actually been around longer
She
than
didn't
zoning.
read it, did she?
Excuse me,
Ms. Heller,
Mike?
excuse
Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel, could you read the motion here?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I forgot that I need to
No,
read
that's
that
fine.
part. Yes. I move that the Article 2 be amended by striking 6.14.7 design requirements, the words C, when an ADU has a separate exterior entrance from the principal dwelling, the ADU's entrance shall not be located on the same building facade as the entrance to the principal dwelling, and replacing it with the words, where there are two or more existing entrances on the front facade of a principal dwelling in which an ADU is to be located, one shall appear to be the principal entrance, and the other entrances appear to be secondary.
The votes, the planning board voted in favor of this amendment 5-0. The select board voted in opposition to amendment 1-2, 1 in favor and 2 opposed. So I think those are the votes. Go ahead, Rachel.
Mr. Moderator, this is actually the rest of that first amendment. Would you like me to finish reading that?
Please.
Okay, well, you said the vote, so I wasn't sure if you were moving into the presentation.
No, I know. I cut you off. Go ahead, please.
No problem. And further amended by striking under D the words, an exterior staircase serving an ADU shall not be visible from the street and must be fully enclosed, and replaced with the words, any new exterior stairs needed to provide primary or secondary means of egress for the ADU shall be located on the side or rear of the building.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Great. There we go. There's the slides. Thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, sorry about that, my amendments fine-tune the proposed bylaw to make it easier for homeowners to create ADUs. Now, ADUs have been around longer than zoning has existed, and more states and municipalities have been creating a wide range of policies to not only allow, but to actually encourage accessory dwelling units since the mid-2000s. And that's because it is a way to add more diversity in our housing stock and create more homes at different price points. Here in Belmont, we really get the benefit of learning from the work that states and communities have done for decades to help us create a bylaw that will work for Belmont homeowners and renters. Next slide, please. ADUs are part of the housing solution. That's why we've seen more states and municipalities adopt policies that allow for and encourage the creation of ADUs. Here in Belmont, ADUs are frequently asked about in public meetings about housing. It's named as a housing strategy in both Belmont's Housing Production Plan and Belmont's Age-Friendly Action Plan, because ADUs increase affordability for homeowners and renters, they foster intergenerational living, and they provide housing options for our local workforce. Next slide, please. Now, for homeowners to create ADUs and for policies to be effective, there are 3 key ingredients that are needed. Design guidelines cannot make it so difficult that the costs add up and people can't build them. Zoning needs to be by right, and financing needs to be available. These all really work together. Design or dimensional guidelines, which my amendment is about, this includes the placement of. These have a big impact on cost and can therefore limit financing options. Many communities have made changes over time because they see their policies are a limiting factor. In Newton, they've had an ADU bylaw for decades. They have continued to refine it over time, allowing exterior stairs to make it more affordable and allowing detached ADUs in addition to the attached ADUs they've allowed for decades. A Harvard study from 2023 states that restrictive rules lead to less ADUs, which lead to less financing products, which lead to less builders who are experienced in ADU construction. For ADUs to be part of the housing solution for Belmont and to provide this tool that is being called for by seniors, homeowners, and renters, we need to allow some flexibility to make that possible. Next slide, please. So my first amendment allows flexibility for entrances and stairs. This can make ADUs financially feasible. The proposed bylaw does not allow the ADU entrance to be on the same side of the house as the entrance to the primary home. Homeowners need some flexibility here to work with their particular property. The front may be the best spot based on the setup of their living space. A front entrance might make it more physically accessible too. As noted earlier, this really fits into a style we already have in town. There are plenty of single-family homes with 2 entrances. I base the language for this amendment off of bylaws in other communities, such as Lexington, which allows ADUs to have a front entrance as long as the primary home's entrance is clear. My amendment also allows for exterior stairs. If an ADU is not on the first 2 egresses, 2 sets of interior stairs may not be possible or may simply be too costly. Newton allows for exterior stairs to address the cost issues. The language I used reflects Saugus's bylaw, which allows for exterior stairs on the side or the back of the building. My amendment allows the exterior stairs to be on the side of the back, not at the front entrance. So providing some flexibility for the homeowner to work with their particular home and their particular property can make or break whether or not they create an ADU. I hope that you will support this amendment. It's something that many people in town have been looking for.
Thank you, Ms. Heller. Ellen?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk. There are 3 people with their hands up. Joan Drevens, Joe Wright, and Aaron Picklingus are the first 3.
Thank you. Ms. Drevens.
Okay, hi, good evening. I just had a question about, I'd like to know why the 2 select board members voted no on this amendment.
So I'll turn to, I believe either Ms. Dion or Mr. Epstein were the 2 who voted no. Would one of them want? We can come back to that. It's a fair question, of course. Who's next? Joe Wright.
Thank you. I am Joe Wright, town meeting member, precinct 1. I rise in support of this amendment. I strongly, sorry, I'm having some interference. I strongly support this amendment because it strongly supports our seniors, our families, our diverse households in figuring out how to make ADUs work for them. Every house is different, every lot is different. Putting extra restrictions on ADUs diminishes the possibilities that ADUs represent, which mean flexibility for homeowners. The restrictions that are being struck down here have no visible policy justification, and Ms. Heller's amendment is supported by the planning board, and I also support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Pinkaligas.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much. Aaron Picklingus, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I rise in support of this amendment to lower the barriers to creating this very much needed housing in town. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen?
Mr. Moderator, there are Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk. There are 7 people with their hands raised, and starts with Ellen Sugarman, Doug Koplaw, and Michael McNamara, the first 3.
Okay, Ms. Sherman? You there, Ellen? I'll come back to you, Ellen. Doug Koplow, do you want to speak?
Thanks very much, Doug Koplow, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I rise in opposition to this amendment, especially doing it now. I have a couple concerns, primarily with the stair one. The current wording allows unenclosed exterior stairs for both the primary and secondary means of egress. And I do not think that all access to an ADU, including potentially on upper stories, should be unenclosed. It was mentioned as a benefit to seniors. I think this may be an issue for seniors, especially in bad weather. I'm also concerned about the unenclosed stairs with the 5-foot setbacks on the side and rear, and how this will affect the neighbors. I also noted that the Newton bylaw was mentioned as a model. The exterior staircases under their ADU bylaw are expected to minimize visual intrusion and be complementary to the existing building. And Newton also has provisions on the front entrance, which allows them only on facades that already have more than one street facing a door. I think in both of these areas that we can probably work out language that is workable, but I don't think the language being presented here tonight is that language. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael McNamara.
Michael McNamara, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. Hi, sorry. It just, there was some type of interference going on. Michael McNamara, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. Just really quickly, I wanted to note that something that we always sort of don't go too much in depth, but if we're talking about affordability, and making sure that the developer or whoever is trying to build the property can do so in a way that's reasonable and more likely to actually get housing built. It's a big deal to make sure that there are lower bars to entry, and make sure that the process, especially for our businesses, is also streamlined. So we should make it streamlined not just for Belmont business, but also for Belmont housing and Belmont families. And this, I think, is a fair method to get some of the local government streamlined and make this process easier. And I'd finally say that with people with disabilities, anyone can be disabled at any time. Anyone can go out and unfortunately, get in their car and have an accident and suddenly be needing a smaller or a more easily accessible apartment, or be a senior and really need some help with being having a caregiver help you. I feel like this is a step in the right direction that'll be easier for people with disabilities and will help improve housing for them and for a lot of our seniors as well. So I'm urging people to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Elizabeth Dion in response to the earlier question.
Elizabeth Dion, a Select Board Chair, Town Meeting Member at Large. The question was why I had recommended against favorable action on this amendment. I have absolutely no problem with 2 front doors. I think that's fine. I am concerned that 2 exterior stairs with a 5-foot step back really does start to impinge on good neighborly relations. I think we're making a first good step. I've always supported ADUs. This is something I've talked about for years. I'm really glad that the state is active and that we're acting. But we have time. We can start and take some first important steps tonight and then evaluate what it really means to have a 5-foot setback, and then not just a 5-foot setback, but which again, I support the main motion. I opposed postponing this consideration. But I do think that this becomes very, very close to other people's properties, and we are impacting people's homes.
Thank you. Let me try Ellen Sugarman again. Ms. Sugarman? She's having trouble accessing.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien,
Yes.
Cushman. Town clerk, at this time, there are 12 people with their hands up. Paul Roberts, Ann Mann, and Melissa McIntyre are the first three.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Hi there, Paul Roberts, town meeting member from Precinct 8. I am standing in support of this amendment, and if possible, I'd like to hear from the planning board, the chair of the planning board, on that board's vote unanimously in favor of this and what their rationale for that vote was.
Of course. Mr. Yates.
Sure. So I'll do my best to summarize what the sentiment from.
Identify yourself, Taylor.
Taylor Yates, chair of the planning board, town meeting member, precinct 2. You want me to? Yeah. So I'll do my best to summarize. So a couple of things. One is the planning board consistently throughout the process favored an approach that would allow for more ADUs rather than less within reasonable boundaries. And when Ms. Heller presented her amendment, I think the feeling was that lots of homes in Belmont have 2 doors on the front, and so it does not diminish the aesthetic of the neighborhood to have a second front door, even when the primary dwelling unit is a single-family home. And I think stairs followed kind of the same rationale. It's just it seemed like a reasonable accommodation to reduce the cost of building an ADU that would not degrade the character of neighborhoods.
Thank you. Next, Ann Mann.
Hi, Ann Mann, Precinct 4, again disclosing that I'm a realtor, and part of that has me supporting this motion because I sell properties all the time where I can see that there at a time was 3 generations that were living in the same house, although that we had bedrooms and basements that are no longer to code and would be allowed because there wasn't an egress. There were, grandparents, parents, and children all in the same property. And I support the amendment because it actually could save lives. It would be to code. It would have emergency exits. And, if you have an outside staircase, then it's annoying you. I'd rather be annoyed than have somebody who can't get out of a dwelling during a fire. So, and again, we have seniors that frequently say, I can't afford to live here anymore. And it used to be that Belmont was the town where parents, grandparents, and children all lived together and in harmony. And especially where I was in Precinct 4, this was so common in the 2-family district. And I 100% support this and think this is going to be a future model for us because it's getting more and more unaffordable to live anywhere. So thank you. And thanks, Rachel.
Ellen.
Ellen, sorry. Oh, no, it is Rachel. Sorry.
Ellen O'Brien, Cushman, town clerk, thanks very much. We skipped over Lisa Pargoli, who had started to ask a question earlier under the motion to postpone, and we never came circling back to her, Mr. Moderator. I wonder if we could do that now.
Would that be appropriate to this amendment or to the debate? I think let's wait to the full debate.
She's asked to be heard, so I think we should open the microphone and ask her
Sure,
what she'd
Lisa,
like to do.
Lisa, does this relate to this amendment? Please go ahead.
I believe so.
Okay, go
it's
ahead.
Lisa Pargoli, Precinct 4. the ADUs, talking about them, nothing has been mentioned about how financially, but property taxes, how will they be assessed? Because they're separate. One's a separate building, one can be attached, and then one can be in the basement. How would you define that? Or are they not going to be taxable?
Well, does anybody have any town official want to comment on that?
Because I do feel that, you're putting more people into the town, and if we're not going to be getting some type of revenue, there's still services that, they will be taking advantage of, which is fine, but there should be some kind of taxation on it.
There is. Mr. Yates.
Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. How much these are going to get taxed is probably more of an assessor question, but these will generate taxes for the town the same way any other expansion of a home would. I don't know what the formula they'd run it through is, but it will generate tax revenue.
Will that be done before this goes into effect? I mean, because you have different options. That's what's confusing to me, as a dwelling that would be outside, separate. And how would you tax a dwelling that is in the basement of already a home? You double tax the owner, or do you separately do that?
Let me recognize the assessor, I believe.
Dan Dargon. He just disappeared.
Oops, he was here and he disappeared, I guess.
We just promoted him to panelist, so he should be.
All right, I guess he's coming in a moment.
Dan, you should be free to speak if your mic's working.
Well, let me come back to Dan. Go ahead, Ellen.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. We have Ellen Sugarman is prepared to speak now, and she will be recognized as under Paul Richter's Zoom account.
Okay, great. Ellen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is Ellen Sugarman, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. The issue why you couldn't hear me was because I ran into a previous meeting. I was on an iPad and you are unable to unmute me from an iPad. We tried this back months ago and it didn't work then, but it was immaterial at the time. But it happening now is what reminded me. So please have Mr. McClure or whoever is appropriate look into it. I have since switched to my phone, but I'm coming through my husband's connection at the moment. My question has been asked by Paul Roberts since I attempted to, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sugarman. Who is next?
Are you going to
Melissa
come
Mack-
back to me, Lisa Pargoli?
Yeah, I'm trying to get an answer to your question. Is Dan available?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, we've heard from Dan Dargon has sent a message saying that he's having difficulty with his microphone. He's going to try and get back in.
So when he gets back in, we will turn to him. And great, thank you. Melissa McIntyre, you're next.
Hi, this is Melissa McIntyre, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Belmont needs housing, and homeowners and those who might like to move to or within Belmont need flexibility in housing. And I think this amendment will help with both of those goals. Therefore, I'm going to be voting in favor of the amendment. And also, as one very brief personal vignette, I have a nearly 97-year-old father who lives in a nursing home, previously lived in assisted living. And if something like this had existed I cannot even imagine how much money we would have saved. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, good for
Thank you. Tom, Ellen, how many in line?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk, there are 7 people with their hands raised. Melissa McIntyre, has just finished. Tom Foley, Mark Kagan, and Judith Fines are the first.
Mr. Foley?
Mr. Moderator, Tom Foley, Precinct 7. I'd like to speak in favor of the motion. I think in particular, I think this is a great improvement over the existing language in terms of clarity. To replace the language that describes the exterior staircase shall not be visible from the street, I think has a lot of potential to open up, uncertainty about visible from where. What do you do with a street that has an irregular, that's not just a straight run in front of the house, that kind of thing. So it seems like a way to facilitate the town reviewing and acting on these proposals, which will further support consistency in allowing people to get their ADUs permitted and move them forward. So it seems like a great improvement to this section of the text and to allowing people to pursue ADU projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Kagan.
Mark Kagan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I rise in support of the amendment largely for the same reasons that Melissa McIntyre has spoken with, and as well as many others, that housing prices are out of control in Belmont, and every little bit that makes it easier to build additional units helps. So Rachel Heller's changes, while seemingly minor, as long as they make it easier to build affordable housing units, are worth putting into the bylaw. I wanted to ask if we could hear from the select board member who voted in favor of this amendment, about his reasoning.
Great, thank you. I would turn to who was it? Matt. Matt. Mr. Taylor, are you here? You could explain why you voted in favor.
As Matt did.
Oh, there. Go ahead, Matt. Well,
he's coming on as a panelist right now. Just be a second.
Okay. Right. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, my neighbors. Matt Taylor, Vice Chair of the Select Board, Town Meeting Member at Large. I did vote in favor of this amendment. A lot of my shaping, a lot of things that shaped my thinking on this. If you go to the aarp.org/ADU, the AARP has long advocated for accessory dwelling units by right. They've updated their thinking and policy guidelines and suggestions, I think as recently as 2020, that aligns a lot with what the state law does, right? Removing owner occupancy requirements. I support this amendment because it means flexibility for builders. If we're going to be efficient with our time and our special permit process, our planning board's time, if we're going to complete our aggressive agenda this year to have zoning overlays for Belmont Center, for Brighton Street, for executing on our town plan, we need to move forward with this, and we need the default to be yes. We're rediscovering multi-generational housing. So we have a couple levers in terms of having an affordable and vibrant community. Overrides support the services that we want, but hurt affordability. ADUs support affordability without taxing our services. My family used to live in a 1-bedroom apartment, 760 square feet. We had a 1-year-old. It's hard. ADUs here are 900 square feet or less. These will be taxable developments. It will update
the overall assessed value of the primary dwelling. We'll get permit fees. It's 1.5% one-time revenue of the project cost. So if it costs $300,000 to build an ADU, that's $4,500 in permit fees, plus say $2,600 a year in recurring revenue for the improvement. We are, the stairs are going to have to respect setbacks. I think the crafting of the wording allows them to be on the back or sides. We want people to have safe access. We want people to, for seniors to stay in town. Top of mind for me is also what might happen with Hill Estates. And that's a category of housing and a strata of affordable apartments. They're not fancy, but just practical housing. And we want to make sure that we maintain that type of choice in Belmont so that we can remain a multi-generational community. So that is why I support this amendment.
Thank you, Matt. We now have an answer to Lisa Pargoli's question. Dan Barry.
Hi, and Matt Taylor actually answered this question in large part in his comments. And you'll do better if Dan Dargan can come because he knows more than I do. But I can say, as indicated, there will.
What?
My audio is on, but you still can't hear me?
Yeah, no.
I can just say your name and I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Dan Barry, town meeting member, precinct 6, and I'm a member, one of the 3 members of the Board of Assessors. In the absence of Dan Dargan, I figured I'd jump in. But Matt Taylor actually, I think, largely answered the question. There would be, on a property that has an accessory dwelling unit, an increase in value and assessment and tax revenue would increase. And actually, at least in some cases, if not all, it would be new growth, which is very valuable to the town because that allows us to go beyond just the normal 2.5% more property tax revenue this year than last year. New growth adds above and beyond that and brings in additional revenue to the community. So in that sense, it's going to bring in more tax dollars.
I'm still a little confused about how that happens because, I mean, who is
Miss Pargoli, he's answered the question. Please identify yourself. I'll let you ask one more question, but we need to move on. Go ahead, Miss Pargoli.
Well, you know what? I'll forego this question and just to state that earlier I was extremely appalled at Mr. Epstein's behavior towards us pushing this along.
Miss Pargoli, you're that's out of order. Ellen, how many more on this amendment?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman, Town Clerk, there are 8 people with their hands raised. Mark Kagan, a couple of duplicates, Angus Abercrombie and Ray Lemieux appear to be the 3.
Let's do the 3. Then we need to take a break.
My hand should not be raised. I already lowered it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So Angus Abercrombie, you're next, Angus.
Angus Abercrombie, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Mr. Moderator, I move to end debate.
Mr. Abercrombie has moved the question. Is there a second? Yes, I see a second. So now we're going to vote on terminating debate on this amendment. Eller Amendment 1. So those in favor of terminating debate, vote aye. Opposed, no. And you can open the polls, James. If debate is terminated, we'll go to the vote on this amendment and then take a brief break. Thank you all for your patience. Thanks. A few more seconds. All right, James, let's show the tally. $185 in favor, 25 opposed, 2 abstentions. We'll get a few more votes here. Emergency votes. Obviously, the motion to terminate debate passes. So once we complete action on the voting here, we'll go to the vote on the motion itself.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, we have 3 emergency votes, all yes: Carol Williams, Ted Dukas, and Tom Yolson.
All right. Do we think there are any other emergency votes, folks? No? Okay. Final tally, 188 in favor, 25 opposed, 2 abstention on the motion to terminate debate. Debate is terminated. So now we go to a vote on Ms. Heller's amendment. If you favor her amendment, vote yes. If you oppose her amendment, vote no. As I say, after this, we'll take a brief break. We'll then go to Ms. Heller's second amendment, and once that's completed, we then go to the main motion under Article 2 as amended or not. We'll wait a minute to show the tally because all right, let's show the tally on the amendment. 166 in favor, 44 opposed, 6 abstention. Ellen, you have some votes.
I do, Mr. Moderator. Ellen O'Brien Cushman, Town Clerk. We have 2 votes, 1 yes, 1 no. Yes from Ted Dukas, no from Tom Yolson.
So we'll scroll through here and take a break. All right. So the final tally is 167 in favor, 45 opposed, 6 abstention. So the motion, the amendment prevails. Let's take a 7-minute break and we'll come back and do Rachel Heller's second amendment. Thank you all for your patience. be resuming momentarily. All right, let's resume where we left off. We're now going to the Second Amendment by Rachel Heller on Article 2. So, Ms. Heller, do you want to read the motion?
Yes, moved the Article 2 be amended by striking Table 6.14.5, the new ADU dimensional requirements, and replacing it with the following table. Single residence A would have a maximum lot coverage of 25%, minimum open space 40%. Single residence B would have a maximum lot coverage of 32.5%, minimum open space of 35%. Single residence C would have maximum lot coverage of 32.5%, minimum open space 35%. Single residence D would have maximum lot coverage of 25%, minimum open space 40%. General residence would have maximum lot coverage of 40% and minimum open space of 20%.
On the votes from the select board, 1 in favor and 2 opposed of this amendment. The planning board voted 1 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention. So with that, Ms. Heller, do you want to briefly describe the purpose of this amendment?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. If I can see the slides, please. This would be slide 5 of that deck. Thank you. And again, my name is Rachel Heller, town meeting member, precinct 3. In full disclosure, I work for an affordable housing organization, but I'm not paid for anything that I am doing in my volunteer time. Okay, so Amendment 2 picks up where we left off on creating flexibility or expanding flexibility for homeowners to be able to create ADUs. This amendment adopts a sliding scale for maximum lot coverage. Rather than allowing a 5% across the board increase to lot coverage for the purpose of adding an accessory dwelling unit, this amendment brings forward something the planning board had considered that allows for different increases in lot coverage depending on the zoning districts. This allows more properties in town to be included. It doesn't mean that more people will actually build accessory dwelling units. It allows for that possibility. If you can go to the next slide, please. Small. You can see that making this change doesn't necessarily add noticeable differences when you look at the town overall. It makes an adjustment that would allow for potentially up to 500 or 600 more accessory dwelling units over time. But I want to note that this map is just to give you a sense of how this amendment adds more potential for accessory dwelling units. It's a tool that is really meant just to help people see what policy could look like in reality. It is not precise and doesn't incorporate all of the details of Belmont's bylaw. So when I talk about the potential for 500 or 600 more, it would actually be less because, again, not all of our inputs for our bylaw can be put into this particular tool. But I do recommend people use that tool. You can see the site here on the map, and it lets you just experiment and put in different dimensions to see what is included and what's not. But I will wrap up with saying, when we make it easier to create accessory dwelling units, we are helping more homeowners and more renters. We are creating new options for downsizing and intergenerational living. We are adding to the town's financial stability because ADUs will bring in permitting revenue and property taxes. And we're adding to the town's commercial tax base because when we have more people who are in areas where they don't always need to drive, we add foot traffic for our local businesses, make our commercial areas more vibrant and successful. I hope you'll vote yes on this amendment and make it easier for people to create the ADUs that we need in town.
Thank you. We now go to a discussion of this amendment. Mr. Abercrombie.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Angus Abercrombie, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. In short, this amendment does a really important job in that it opens up the number of lots that could consider constructing an accessory dwelling unit. As mentioned earlier in debate tonight, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to construct an ADU, which means that for many of our residents, for many of our property owners, it will not make sense to construct an accessory dwelling unit. We should not expect to see accessory dwelling units in every, or even, half, 20%, any significant portion of the lots where we are planning to allow them. What we are trying to do is give as many people the option of having that conversation, of saying, is it financially viable? And that is where we're going to start to see the slow and subtle gains in housing production that will enable more families to live in Belmont, more people to live in Belmont, more seniors to stay in Belmont. So for that reason, I'm supporting this amendment. I think it's going to do good things for my neighborhood and give more of our property owners the opportunity to make the right decision for them on whether or not they want an accessory dwelling unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk. There are 3 people with their hands up: Judith Fines, Kathy Cohane, Jack Weiss.
Ms. Fines.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Thank you for recognizing me. This is Judy Fines, excuse me, from Precinct 5. I rise in enthusiastic support of this amendment. I support it not just because we have a chance with ADUs to make another dent in the substantial housing need in town, but this amendment addresses a fact on the ground in Belmont, which was our enormous variety of lot sizes and shapes. By modestly raising the maximum lot coverage percentage across zoning districts and lowering the minimum open space percentage, this amendment makes it possible to add ADUs to more properties. It thus enables their owners to provide apartments for family members or others and to gain rental income. So that's a win-win for the town and the owners. I urge you to vote yes on the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy Cohane.
Good evening, Kathy Cohane, Precinct 2. I support ADUs, but I cannot support this amendment. We are, I hope, going to pass tonight the ADU legislation, and we need to be balanced and measured in any further changes. We already heard recently, as late as last Friday, the changes on the setbacks. When I attended the sessions that the League of Women Voter had, people raised a lot of questions about existing garages and whether they could be turned in, a lot of concerns about setbacks. We need to walk before we run. I would say not yet on this amendment. Let's pass the broader motion, see what comes forward, and there's always chance to tweak it as we go forward. It's harder to make it more restrictive as opposed to less restrictive. I urge you to vote for balance and not yet, and vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Weiss.
Jack Weiss, Precinct 1. Mike, can you please remind me, if you previously said it, what the planning board vote was on this amendment? And then I would like to ask a question.
Of course, the planning board amendment was 1 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. And I'd just be curious to understand the 3 who voted against this, what the rationale was.
Mr. Barron, Carol, did you want to reply?
Sure. I was one of the no votes. Carol Barbarian.
Identify. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Barbarian, Town Meeting Member Precinct 7 and Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I was one of the 3 no votes on this. As Rachel mentioned, this was a table that we did consider, and we looked at the options for increasing the lot coverage and reducing the minimum open space. When we were going through the options on this, we kept on coming back to the fact that the majority of the lots in our town are non-conforming, and they don't necessarily meet the current minimum lot size for their particular zoning district. We felt that it was a lot of information to try to break down and look at all of the potential outcomes. So similar to a previous comment, we basically reserve the right to take this up again in the future once we have a little bit more information.
Mr. Weiss?
Nope, that helps. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Joe Wright?
Thank you. This is Joe Wright, Precinct 1, Town Meeting Member. I rise in support of the amendment. I think the fact that so many of our lots are non-conforming emphasizes, first of all, how arbitrary many of these lot coverage and open space requirements are, and how many of them actually fail to reflect the built environment of our town, and a process of downzoning that happened after much of our town was built. Therefore, I think we should favor, as a policy goal, again, making ADUs more possible for more lots, more houses, the distribution of seniors in need of ADUs, or families who can bring another family member for an intergenerational family to Belmont, is not distributed evenly by conformity to the prior lot coverage. So I think expanding is the right thing to do, and I strongly support the amendment.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. At this point, there are 5 people with their hands in the air. It's Liz Allison, Doug Hoplaw, and Ann Mann. First.
Okay, Liz Allison.
Liz Allison, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. I am opposed to this amendment for the following reasons. First of all, the discussion that suggests that increasing density is costless, I think, is incorrect. All of this will give the neighbors less privacy and less quiet than they would otherwise have. Second, the suggestion that this brings any fiscal benefit to the town is clearly something that has not been explored. The way you can tell it has not been thoroughly explored is that no one has the assessor's judgments about how taxes, real estate taxes, would be handled. And thirdly, the state law, the new state requirements specifically ban any requirement that these ADUs be restricted to families. So perhaps they will and perhaps they won't. But in any case, they will certainly decrease the privacy and have at best an uncertain and, I believe, a negative fiscal impact on the town. And therefore, I very much agree with the suggestion that we should have some experience with these before we go to the maximum encouragement that could possibly be provided.
Thank you. Doug Koplow.
Thanks very much, Doug Koplow, Precinct 6. The simple mathematical fact is if you allow bigger buildings, taller buildings, buildings that are closer to each other, You will, at the margin, get somebody to do a little bit more or build something additional. But the planning board has already done a lot to increase lot coverage in what is likely the biggest change in Belmont's residential zoning since zoning was created in the town. So I concur with a lot of the other people that we need to see what's actually going to happen on the ground before we start making everything easier to do. And it's important also to remind people that we have town meeting every 6 months. Every single town meeting has zoning bylaw revisions. It is not a big ask to wait and see what happens and come forward when we can do it in a smarter and more efficient way. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. I have been asked on behalf of the moderator to move on to the next person. Ann Mann, please.
Ann Mann, Precinct 4, Realtor. You know, what this does here is it allows our least expensive homes to be able to have an ADU. And our least expensive homes are the people that would probably more than ever, like Melissa pointed out, how expensive it was to have her dad in assisted living. And, you know, I know that we worry about what something's going to look like next door, but when you have a neighbor that's struggling to try to help a parent out, a mother or a father, and I know many of you are worried about it becoming a rental unit, but when you think about your own parents and you think about what their lives are going to be like, and if you are financially struggling and you want to try to help them, and you can put yourselves in their position and you're barely able to afford Belmont in a community that has a smaller lot, I want you to put yourself in their position and try to understand why it is that we need to do something like this, that we need to be sympathetic and understanding. And there are people that can't afford to do this in the properties that they live in. They can't all fit in there. And they need to have first floor living because they've got someone that's handicapped, like my son who has cerebral palsy, or a parent that's in a wheelchair. And you know, maybe think of this from a position of your heart and in kindness instead of from financially and what it's going to look like out of your window. I think that we should be warmer to each other and try to understand what some people are going through here, especially in the communities that may not be able to afford to put their parents in assisted living and be able to handle that burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. This is Ellen Cushman again, stepping in. We're now calling on Paul Roberts, please. And the next three people after Paul are Vincent Stanton, Aaron Picolingus, and Michael McNamara. Mr. Roberts?
Thanks a lot, Ellen. Paul Roberts, town meeting member, Precinct 8. I rise in support of this amendment. And I would echo what Angus said as well, which is, I think if you're like me, you have friends in town in all different precincts, in all different types of neighborhoods, some of them incredibly spacious and houses that far apart, others very densely settled, and many kind of in between. And I think what we want is for all of our neighbors and residents here in Belmont to have the option financially to take advantage of an ADU. And, you know, if that's to build an ADU for their, college graduate to live in, or for their elderly parent, or for them to move into and rent their house out to get the income. I think we want all of our neighbors to enjoy that right, not just the ones who happen to live in really spacious, luxurious neighborhoods. And so that's why I am in support of this amendment. I also would like to hear from the Mr. Moderator, if it's possible, from the planning board member who voted in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm back in business. Who voted for this on the planning board? Taylor, did you?
Yep. Taylor Yates, chair of the planning board, town meeting member precinct 2. Yes, I did vote in favor, and maybe it bears some explanation for where exactly this came from, and that'll kind of explain why I voted in favor. So when we started this process, I believe I mentioned earlier, I asked the planning board, do you want to take a relatively restrictive or relatively permissive approach to allow fewer or more ADUs? And across the board, the planning board expressed a wish to allow for more things within reason. So the town planner, Chris Ryan, took that and basically produced this table, because the most restrictive the most restrictive dimension in ADU development is lot coverage maximum. We took it out for a number of reasons. Carol mentioned some. My personal reasons was I was worried that maybe maybe town meeting wouldn't like this particular part of the article and it would sink the entire thing. What Rachel has done is pretty elegantly allowed us to vote on this table on its own merits. And if if town meeting doesn't like it, then we can still move on to the main article, the main motion.
Aaron Pickaligas.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Aaron Picklingus, town meeting member from Precinct 6. I rise in support of this amendment and would like to respond to a couple of previous comments. First, I fail personally to understand the mechanism where adding value and providing mechanisms to increase our overall assessed values in the existing residential footprint could result in a negative fiscal impact. I don't understand how that would happen. Second, regarding the supposed doubt about regulations regarding restricting use to families, it was my understanding that such restrictions are prohibited by state laws, and I would appreciate if someone can confirm that understanding. Or I guess refute it if I'm wrong, but thank you.
Turning to George Hall here. Carol.
George Hall, Town Council. It is part of the statute that was enacted last year that local regulations on ADUs cannot be conditional on kinship or other relationships between the residents of the principal residence and the ADU. So the things that towns have traditionally done to limit in-law apartments to relatives and so forth are not consistent with state law.
Great, thank you.
Mike, could I just offer a follow-up on that?
Go ahead, Carol. I was mute. I was calling on you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Carol Berberian, town meeting member, precinct 7, vice chair of the planning board, and disclosure, I am also a realtor. In Massachusetts, under our fair housing laws, familial status is considered a protected class. So George did reference the fact that an ADU rental does not have to be limited to a family member. But I think that Aaron was also referencing another part of state law that would prohibit someone discriminating against somebody because of the size of their family.
Thank you. Elizabeth Dion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Elizabeth Dion, Select Board Chair, town meeting member at large. Just wanted to explain my vote against this when the select board voted. If we were in any way, shape, or form able to limit these to family members, sign me up. I think it's fabulous. The challenge that I see is who's going to be able to afford to do this is predominantly developers, and certainly there's a role for developers creating more housing. But part of the reason I wanted to take a go slow approach on this is to see what actually happens. I am concerned that our already very expensive housing stock is now going to be even more expensive as developers compete with private buyers because they can suddenly have 2 units where there was 1. And so, again, I've always been a supporter of ADUs. And the main reason that I've been a supporter of ADUs is for multi-generational living and to allow, whether it's seniors or young families, to find a way to be able to afford to stay in Belmont and pay their taxes. but I do think we have no idea how the market forces on this are going to play out. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Epstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Roy Epstein, Select Board and Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I'm also one of the people who would like to actually see the bylaw passed as it's been proposed without the amendments to get a sense of how this will all work. So we'll have some experience for fine tuning. Just to give you an example, when I think back to the discussion of 3A last fall, there was an awful lot of concern about seeing renderings, and I know that there was actually a similar kind of amendment introduced by Rachel that would have significantly increased density in the Waverly area, and a lot of town meeting members were concerned about that. If you look at what's on the screen here, the current lot coverage for general residents is 30%, and the current open space for general residents is 40%. This is a big, big change in general residence. Lot coverage is going from 30 to 40, and open space is going from 40 to 20. I'm just reluctant to make that kind of change without any way of representing what that would actually look like. And I think the concerns about what it would look like were legitimate last fall, and they're legitimate now. And I think let's proceed as it's been proposed, and then if we think differently a year from now, it's straightforward enough to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ada Baptista.
Oh. Ada Batista, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. To make a couple points. Seniors. One of the main reasons why I ran for town meeting was because of just my own past experience of my my grandmother needing affordable housing and wanting to make sure that seniors can stay in their homes or have housing choice. Every time I run, that's one of the most important things to me. And I think that like anything we could do to keep seniors in Belmont, near their families or where they've lived and grown the town, to help us newer folks coming into town is a good thing. And I think that we should be thinking of that first. Secondly, I tend to agree with the previous speaker around lot coverages. It'd be cool to be able to see and understand. I agree how what this means, like what it means for each particular size. Having said that, clearly Ryan and the planning board has developed this chart, and they have the data as to what is a residence A, B, C, D. So maybe we could pose that question to them, and maybe they might have that data so we can show it, so it's not so esoteric. I do have one other point after that, Michael. So I don't know if that's something that could be done. Maybe the planning board or Mr. Ryan can take a look at can just say what's the typical residence A or what's the typical residence D and so forth.
Chris Ryan.
Yes, my video is not being permitted at this time, so that's why I didn't turn it on. Yeah, we did some analysis to show specifically for some trial parcels in general residence to see what it might look like, how it might affect individual parcels. Most of these were already non-conforming. And so, there was some visible impact, but it wasn't striking. Obviously, residence A and D are the largest lots, B, C, and general residence are the smaller, which is why most of these changes that are proposed here in the sliding scale are more, applicable to those specific districts. But we didn't do a district by district analysis, but we felt that based on the lot size, the individual increases in maximum lot coverage in the sliding scale were appropriate to those districts themselves.
Thank you. Ellen?
Ellen O'Brien Cushman, Town Clerk. This time there are 11 people with their hands up. Vincent Stanton, Michael McNamara, and Rachel Watson are the first three.
Mr. Stanton, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vincent Stanton, Precinct 3. I support the underlying article and would be open to consider this amendment at a future date, but I agree with others who've suggested that, starting with Kathy Cohen, who suggested that we have some time to see the impact of this amendment. I guess I have to admit I'm cynical enough to ask, what is the most aggressive use of this, of the increased coverage that this would allow? And although a lot of the discussion has been around multifamily living, and I agree with Ms. Dion that if we're restricted to families, then I would definitely be a yes vote. But in some U.S. cities, private equity owns a significant fraction, not in New England so much, but a significant fraction of the single family homes in some of those cities, like Atlanta, for example. The Urban Institute estimates 28% of the rental houses are owned by private equity. So, what would and remember, under the state law, neither the primary residence nor the accessory dwelling unit need be occupied by the owner. So, what would an investor seeking to maximize the income from the property do? Where would they site the accessory dwelling unit? And how could they? I understand it's limited to 900 feet, but maybe that's a red herring because that those groups are not present in New England states like they are elsewhere. But I do think that it's a little bit misleading to frame this exclusively in terms of helping struggling families. As I say, if it was limited to that under the bylaw, then that would be an easy yes vote. But I think Ms. Dean also pointed out that the folks who have the money to do this are also often the investor class. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael McNamara.
Michael McNamara, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. I just want to add really quickly that I think something also that's lost in this conversation is we are trying to make it easier for folks to be able to build ADUs. And in some ways, that's sort of cutting local regulation, but also local government. Like if you sort of want a more small government, less in your face sort of town or state telling you what to do, then allowing more opportunities for people and reducing the red tape about what can and can't be built would sort of be up your alley. And I've heard this argument made by other folks that trying to reduce regulation, reduce restrictions, stop having the town say no might be beneficial not only because we get more housing, but also other business people and businesses might look at this and say, oh, they are open for business. They are willing to negotiate with us. They are willing to cut some regulation to make it more reasonable for us to come in. So you may agree with that logic, you may not, but I feel like that's something that we should consider as well, that we are trying to limit government and limit town government in some ways by allowing people to build a little bit more of what they want without the government coming or the town coming in and sort of elbowing them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Taylor.
Matt Taylor, Vice Chair of the Select Board, Town Meeting Member at Large. Mr. Moderator, would you be willing to let me share some maps that I shared at tonight's Select Board meeting that might help Town Meeting understand the difference between this amendment and the main motion?
Yes. Can we do it within 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have to request sharing. While I wait to see if I can share, I think this really comes down to, do you believe, this is Matt Taylor, Vice Chair of Select Board, Town Meeting Member at Large. I think this comes down to, do we believe people should have the option to build an ADU? And the overwhelming advice from the AARP is that we should allow it. They oppose family and owner occupancy restrictions because multi-generational living means more than just on a single parcel, but it means within a community. And by allowing ADUs more broadly and more generally, especially on our smaller, more affordable lots, that means that people can stay in their community while also getting supplemental rental income. So what I've done, is my map showing?
Yes.
So this is the main motion map, and this is the amended map. It's hard to tell the difference, but this third map is the difference. I used the same tool that Rachel used and was sent to town meeting members, and this helped me understand the difference between Amendment 3 and the main motion. And the green highlighted parcels are parcels that would be allowed to have an ADU by right. Possibly, it fits the broad general constraints of setbacks and size and lot coverage maximums. And the major areas that are affected are like, say, the general residence area next to Chenery, which is a high percentage of seniors living in that neighborhood. In and around Town Field, which is general residence, right? What's next to Town Field is our senior center, right? We want this area to be multi-generational, not just on a single parcel. So I believe that owners should be able to supplement their income. I believe the planning board should be focusing on our urgent goals of zoning for our commercial growth and our commercial centers and our town plan, rather than special permits. General residence is a majority of the special permit hearings in front of the planning board. When we talk about expensive lots, this amendment allows the less expensive lots, presumably with less wealthy owners, to have the right to add an ADU at all. So this is a practical change that I think, is going to have a positive housing choice effect on our town, which is why I voted at our meeting to support the amendment, and I hope you will support it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for letting me share this map. I hope you found it helpful.
Thank you, Matt. Ellen?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, Town Clerk. There are 8 people in line. Rachel Watson, Roger Rubel, Jeff Lubian are the first 3.
Okay, Rachel Watson.
I wanted to sort of add on to what Ann
Rachel,
Mann was.
can you identify? Hey,
Oh,
Rachel,
sorry, this
could
is
you
Rachel
identify?
Watson from Precinct 4.
Thank you.
And I wanted to add on to what Ann Mann was saying about families staying together and, our elder and our disabled neighbors. I am a single mom and I have 2 kids who have disabilities, and I live with them and my parents, my retired elderly parents. And for me and for my children, this was how we could stay in Belmont, and I could keep them in a place that they have been in since they were babies, with the community that they know and understand, in the school system that has been supporting them, and how my elderly parents could leave a different state and come move closer to their child and their grandchild. We're all kind of, I don't know how people are thinking of this, but my parents sold their house and came up here and we bought a place together. So the idea that only developers would be building ADUs, I think, is mistaken. Housing is expensive. Nursing home care is really expensive, and families want to be together. So people are investing their money in homes where they can be together and multi-generational living. And especially if family members are older or one or more of them has a disability. The advantages of grouping together are it's hard to put a dollar value on it, but it certainly beats trying to put everybody in a home. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger Rubel.
I move the question. Roger Rubel, Precinct 5.
Mr. Rubel has moved the question to terminate debate. So is there a second? Yes, there is.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, Town Clerk, there are 9 people with their hands up at this point.
Great, thank you. So motion to terminate debate on this amendment, Ms. Heller's second amendment. If you favor terminating debate, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the vote.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman here. We have several emergency votes on the terminate debate motion, and there are 3 yeses: Elaine Alligood, Ted Dukas, Carol Williams, 1 no from Tommy Olson.
So the final tally seems to be 186 in favor, 25 opposed, 1 abstention for the record. So debate is terminated. So now we will go directly to the vote on the motion. So this is Ms. Heller's second amendment. If you favor the amendment, vote yes. If you oppose it, vote no. Few more seconds. All right, James, let's see the tally. Well, at this moment, subject to the emergency votes, it's 105 in favor, 107 opposed, 4 abstentions. So
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, the town clerk. On the Heller Amendment 2, we have 1 vote yes from Ted Dukas. We have 3 votes no, Carol Williams, Tommy Olson, Julie Brady.
So that would make the tally at this moment 106 in favor, 110 opposed. I want to make sure there are no other emergency votes before we declare it. Right. There aren't any. So the final tally is 106 in favor, 110 opposed. So the amendment fails. We now turn at 10:10 to a discussion of the main motion as amended. The First Amendment was withdrawn. Third Amendment was defeated, but Rachel Heller's First Amendment, the second overall, was approved. So we are debating the main motion as amended by Ms. Heller's First Amendment. So discussion is open. We have covered an awful lot through 3 amendments and the motion to postpone. We've covered an awful lot of discussion. So I would urge people to be brief. And so we'll open it up. Mr. Richter. Or maybe it's Ellen.
No, this time it's me. Paul Richter, town meeting member from Precinct 8, chair of the warrant committee. I've heard several requests about fiscal impact. I just wanted to report the efforts made by the warrant committee to try to analyze potential fiscal impact.
Can you speak up, Mr. Richter?
You're having trouble hearing me? Is this better?
Yes, that's better, Paul.
Okay. Again, Paul Richter, town meeting member from Precinct 8, chair of the warrant committee. 2 members of the warrant committee, me and my colleague Bill Anderson, did an analysis of potential fiscal impact of ADUs. This is challenging because the impact totally hinges on the number of school-age children who will live in ADUs, and that's difficult to predict. For the MBTA communities, there was a consulting group that estimated the town would roughly break even at a ratio of 0.3 school-age children per household. That means for every 10 units of new housing, if there are 3 school-age children living in those 10 households, it would result in revenues and costs being roughly equal. Bill and I found that for ADUs, the break-even point for the town is different. This is because property tax revenue increase for ADUs appears to be smaller than for other housing. The estimate we were working with was an average of $3,000 in new property tax income per ADU. We still haven't heard a clarification on whether that's the right number, but we were working with that number. With that number, we found roughly 0.1 school-age child per ADU was the break-even point for the town. If that ratio was say 0.2 or 0.3, so 2 or 3 school-age children for 10 ADUs, there would be a net cost to the town. We looked at a few different scenarios. Basically, it looked like maybe a cost of $50,000 to $150,000 per year, depending on the number of children, the number of ADUs constructed. There's another source of uncertainty, which is the level of educational services that any kids living in ADUs will need. We are legally and morally required to provide all educational services that the children of Belmont need. If any school-age children who reside in ADUs require more educational resources than the median student, the potential costs will be even higher. Each out-of-district special education placement costs the town an average of $100,000. In summary, net cost to the town totally hinges on how many school-age children reside in ADUs and what services they require. Both of these are impossible to predict. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richter. Kevin Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kevin Cunningham, Precinct 4. The previous discussion about the amendment put me into a question. First of all, I'm in favor of this motion, but I was wondering, how does this change, if at all, our relationship to open space in housing? Does it change our value in terms of, we seem to be weighing more for housing as opposed to the open space? I'm wondering if it has any effect on our principles or our approach to that, what the value of open space is in town. Can anyone comment?
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator. We have a point of order from Cosmo Macero.
Okay, Cosmo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Cosmo Macero, Precinct 5 Town Meeting Member. I believe, Mr. Moderator, this is either a point of order or information. The recap of the analysis that's been performed on the economic impact or the fiscal impact involves a significant amount of calculations, projections, estimates based on the impact of or the number of school-age children potentially occupying future accessory dwelling units. That feels dangerously close to making calculations based on factors that aren't really allowed when it comes to housing accessibility and availability. Those are calculations based on factors that are primary issues of concern when it comes to housing discrimination. I don't believe that the town should make calculations based on those factors. That's it.
Mr. Chair, I don't really think this is a point of order, but
I think you're right. But I think it needed to be said immediately. That's the chair of the warrant. That's the chair of the warrant committee talking about calculations that sound like the things you think about when you decide who you want to occupy a unit. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a calculation. I mean, let me ask the town council if he has any views as to whether this has crossed some line. George
Hall, Town Council. I don't think I heard anything that crossed a line. I think the point is well taken that the town cannot be making housing decisions or regulations that are discriminatory based on disability or family size or status or many other similar things. I think that should be taken as by all of us as a constraint, but I don't think anything that was set up to this point created a problem in that regard.
Let me go back to Kevin Cunningham. I think you were interrupted, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you, Mike. Kevin Cunningham, Precinct 4. Basically, my question goes to the question of the value of open space, given that these setbacks are altering slightly, and they would have altered more if the previous thing had been approved. Has an environmental impact study been done as far as if there were these things were built, that would be that much less open space? Can anyone respond to the impact of this for the value of open space and runoff and that whole kind of stormwater? Has that been assessed?
Mr. Ryan, has any sort of study been done?
No, there has not been any environmental impact
Chris, just identify. Chris, sorry, identify.
Chris Ryan, Director of Planning and Building. There have not been any environmental assessments that have been conducted.
Okay, and follow up, Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Cunningham.
Sorry. Is there an assessment? There's an assessment about if we pass this, it could allow for so many more units. Has the opposite thing said that this would mean this much less open space? Is there a calculation for how much open space would be lost by this growth?
Mr. Ryan?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you.
Ellen?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman, the town clerk. I am calling on you to call on Dan Kane, who's representing Julia Corbett. She's been waiting, having difficulties with her microphone. And then Ada Baptista and Ray Lemure would be the next two. And there are 15 people now in line.
Okay. Julia?
Mr. Moderator, this is Dan Kane speaking on behalf of Julia Corbett. She has two questions. The first, she's from Precinct 2, by the way. The first question is the designation of an ADU space a permanent change? Will it show up on your property deed? And her second question, would there be an increase in property tax if there was no increase in the foot of the building?
Mr. Ryan,
I
the
can
answers
try
to
to
you.
answer it. Chris Ryan, Director of Planning and Building. I would assume, and this is a sort of an assessment question, so I would defer to Dan on that part, but I would think that any improvement to a structure, if the ADU is built internal to it, would increase the value of the assessment and probably increase the taxable returns from that. The other question I don't have an answer to.
All right. Mr. Baptista?
Hi, Adam Batista, town meeting member, Precinct 3. I have 2 points to make. I'll make the first point. It doesn't ask for a person first, so I can make it now. The first point is I think there are more costs to factor other than school costs and revenues to factor, like excise taxes when a new resident comes into town, or not necessarily a factor, but to understand that can be realized. So I think that there should be a more broader scope around the costs, is my opinion. The second thing is that we've had a long conversation here tonight, and some of the points that was made in the initial presentation, I think people might be forgetting. So I just want to ask if Taylor or someone could just recap the benefits of this rule as opposed to the law that's already in existence, that anyone could actually pull a permit today to get an ADU in Belmont. That's already a law, as bestowed by the state. Can you just recap again, just briefly, why we need to do this in the first place, just to make sure people are reminding, so we're not asking the same questions over and over again? Thanks, Taylor and or Ryan or whoever else.
Sure, happy to. And
Mr. Yates, I just ask you to be brief on this since you did cover it earlier.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, town meeting member, Precinct 2, and I encourage Krista to jump in on this one as well. So just a reminder, we are not deciding whether or not to allow ADUs in Belmont. The state law already makes them allowable by right in Belmont. Any of you, no matter what happens tonight, can go to the Office of Planning and Building tomorrow and demand a building permit for an ADU. What we are trying to do is just create the rules of the road so that Chris and Ara can say efficiently and accurately who gets a building permit and who does not. And then in terms of, I also mentioned there's some parts of our bylaw that conflict with the state law. You know, right now you can do an ADU if you're in a historic district with a special permit, and that's against the state law.
Thank you. We'll go to Ray Lemieux. Oh, sorry. Julie Corbett had a follow-up question, so let's come back to that. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is Dan Kane from the Town Clerk's Office on behalf of Julia Corbett, Precinct 2.
Yes.
Is the ADU designation a permanent change to the legal definition of your real estate?
You know the answer?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mr. Moderator.
Taylor, go ahead, Mr. Yates.
Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe you could re-articulate it.
Well, George Hall, Town Council. If the question is directed to the taxable status of the property, first of all, properties are assessed based on their market value. So an investment in a property that raises its market value would raise the amount of taxes due on that property. And properties are assessed based on their status in the previous year. So if an ADU was built and then at some point removed, then it would change. So it's not, in that sense, it's not permanent. There's no other form of record keeping I think the town engages in that would permanently designate something as an ADU if it had been abandoned at some point by the property owner.
Thank you. Carol Barbarian?
Chris might want to take part of this. We had conversations at the
Identify yourself, Carol.
Thank you. Carol Barbarian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. We had conversations about the state's recommendations on creating registries, but we also had a conversation about the usage of an ADU, especially when a property transfers from one owner to another. You could change the internal space again. And so you could remove the kitchen and things like that. So that way it would no longer be considered a usable accessory dwelling unit.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Ellen, how many do we have here?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, rounding the bend here. We have 13 people who have their hands up. Ray Lemieux, Chris Doyle, and Bob McGaw are the first three.
All right. Ray Lemieux, you are up.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Ray Lemieux, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I am a builder and a real estate agent in town. I was just asking a very practical question about the ability to have a staircase taking up part of the 5-foot setback around an accessory dwelling unit, and whether that offends the fire department in any way. I thought that offset was mainly for them to be able to safely and properly get around structures in case there's a fire. And putting a 3-foot wide staircase and a 5-foot wide setback would seem to make that difficult.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes, it's my It's Chris Ryan,
sorry, Chris.
Director of Planning and Building. I'm going to also ask Ara Yogurdian to clarify anything that I missed. But my understanding is that that staircase is part of the, must be set back as part of the structure, the main structure. So it would not be allowed to be in the encroachment. And there are, yes, fire and building code additional requirements that all those buildings must meet. So it's not just zoning. There are other provisions that apply potentially. So I'll see if Ara has any additional things to add to that.
Let me ask Ms. Barbarian first. Carol?
In our general zoning bylaw, we also have.
Carol, identify.
Thank you. Carol Barbarian. I'm used to the planning board meeting. Sorry. Carol Barbarian, town meeting member, precinct 7, vice chair of the planning board. I'm looking for the specific section and hoping R can weigh in on this. There is a section of our bylaw that does limit how far things can go into the setbacks. And I want to say it's 4 feet that has to be left clear, but hoping R can clarify on that. But that I know is in our general bylaw as well.
Thank you. Ara, are you?
I'm here.
Here? Great.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Other Egerton Inspector of Buildings, in the same section of 4.3.5, when it says 5 foot clear from the principal building, principal dwelling, or any other structures, and from the property lines, those have to be maintained regardless if it's a staircase, and they will not be exempt by the section 4.2.2 amendment addendum, which is they don't anything projecting less than 4 feet or not higher than 3 feet. Those also have to have a minimum 4 foot clearance from the side property line and 10 feet from the rear property line, regardless. So that's in our other section of the bylaw, and so that 5 feet might be at 4 feet on the side, but has to be 10 feet from the rear. So if anyone constructing an ADU detached at the rear of the property and wants to have that landing, which is exempt, will not meet the requirement if the building itself is at 5. So the minimum clearance must be at 4 feet, even with those exempt landings and stairs.
Great. Thank you for the clarity. I was sure you were on top of that. All right. I appreciate it. It just wasn't terribly clear in the amendment by Ms. Heller. It did seem like the 5 foot setback was mentioned and then the staircase was being approved. So I just wanted to let everyone know that would disallow a structure if you had to put the staircase in the setback.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. LaBelle. Chris Doyle, you're next.
Hi, Chris Doyle, town meeting member, precinct 6. I rise to support the article and hope that it passes tonight. I encourage others to support it. I am dismayed. I was dismayed by the warrant committee characterization with regard to kids. It is true, certainly, that probably the financial impact is impacted by whether or not kids move into an accessory dwelling unit. But of course, a child that needs additional services could also move into a single family home. So the characterization of the type of child that would move into a home is irrelevant to the assessment of this article. So I would set that aside. Thank you very much.
McGaw.
Bob McGaw, Precinct 1. I move the question.
Mr. McGaw has moved the question. Ellen, how many do we have in line here? We have quite a few.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, Town Clerk. There are 13 people in line.
Is there a second to Mr. McGaw's motion? Yes, there is. All right. So we're not going to vote on the motion to terminate debate on the main motion as amended. So if you want to terminate debate, vote yes. If you don't, vote no. Go ahead. Thank you. All right. A few more seconds here on the voting. All right, James, let's show the tally. It needs to be, well, yeah, it obviously more than 2/3, 160 in favor, 45 opposed, 2 abstentions. Ellen, do we have a?
Yes, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk. There are 2 votes on the terminate debate motion. 1 yes, 1 no. Tommy Olson, no. Ted Dukas, yes.
Okay. So we'll scroll this. Thank you, James. So the final tally on Mr. McGough's motion is 161 in favor, 46 opposed, and 2 abstentions. So that means we now vote on the main motion as amended by Ms. Heller's first amendment. So if you favor the main motion as amended, you'll vote yes. If you oppose it, you'll vote no. So let's open the voting. Are you okay, George? All right, a few more seconds here. All right, James, could you show the tally? So the tally, the vote is 178 in favor, 30 opposed, 4 abstention. And Ellen has the emergency.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien, Cushman Town Clerk. Emergency votes. I have Tommy Olson votes no. Carol Williams votes no. Ted Dukas votes yes.
So scroll this. So there's 1 more yes, 179, and 2 more no's. Correct, Ellen? So the final tally for the record is 179 in favor, 32 opposed with 4 abstentions. So that completes action on Article 2. The final article is Article 3, 3A. Mr. Yates, do you want to read the motion?
Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. Move to amend sections 2.1 and 9.5A of the Belmont zoning bylaw as printed in Appendix C of the warrant for this town meeting.
And the votes, both the planning board and the select board voted unanimously in support of this motion. Who is going to, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Yates, Mr. Bavarian, you're all there. Who wants to?
I can lead off on this. So there are 2 changes that we're proposing tonight. One is extremely clerical, and one is a correction of the bylaw to reflect the intent of the planning board and I believe town meeting. So the first correction is in the zoning bylaw. There's basically just a table or a list of our overlay districts, and we did not add the MBTA Communities Act overlay district to that table. So that's the first. That's the first thing we'd like to change. The second thing, which is more substantive but still reflects the intent of what we were all looking to do, was you may all remember this thing we called the dimensional table, which shows like how tall buildings were, how far they had to be set back from the lot lines, et cetera, et cetera. And it was for each of the different zoning sub-districts. On one dimensional criteria for one of the sub-districts, somewhere in the process, we the setbacks were not what we intended them to be. And they ended up turning them into being more restrictive than the underlying zoning. And that is District 5A, which would affect a property on White Street essentially behind Tate.
Taylor, it's 5B.
Sorry, 5B.
Sorry. Carol Barbarian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7.
Mr. Varen, did you want to add anything? Go ahead if you do.
No, I think Taylor pretty much covered everything. The underlying zoning for LB1, which that single 5B district is in, is 6 feet or none at the base level. So we're really just tying that in to what the underlying zoning is.
And Mr. Ryan, did you want to add anything? You don't need to, but give it the option.
That's exact. I mean, everything that was spoken about already is how simple this is. That's nothing more to say.
Great, thank you. So now we go to discussion. Norma Maserati, Ms. Maserati.
Yes, Norma Maserati, Precinct 5, Town Meeting Member. How did this surface, or how did you become aware of this discrepancy? Was it associated with something specific? For full transparency here.
Taylor Yates, Chair of the Planning Board, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I'll actually, Carol identified this. I don't know how she did it, but kudos to her. So thank you.
I'm sorry, who did?
Carol.
Okay,
Carol.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah. Ms. Barbarian, do you want to?
Yes, Carol Barbarian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7, Vice Chair of the Planning Board. We actually became aware of the missing item in section 2 when we were going through the 3A zoning. We found it kind of late in the process, so decided to let it be clerical and figured that there would be other cleanup that was needed later. So that we've known about for a little bit. The setbacks was brought to our attention by a couple of different sources. It's only one property, and there was already planned development there that I believe had gone through the ZBA for prior approval. And it was somewhere through that process that
And
was.
what property is that?
This is on White Street. I don't recall the number on White Street. Chris, do you know that one? What number it is?
I don't.
We have one property that's in 5B.
I can look that up fairly easily.
Number 23.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Who's next?
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, there are two people with hands up, Jerry Hovsepian and Chris Doyle.
Right, we'll start with Jerry Hovsepian.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I just want to bring, Yarhof Sepian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I just want to bring to the attention of clerical errors on the 3 pages. Down below, it should be Appendix C-1, C-2, and C-3.
Mr. Ryan, is that correct?
I do believe that is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that correct. I will allow that correction to be made for the record. Thank you. Chris Doyle. Oh, then.
Hi, good evening. Not to belabor this, but just building on Norma's question, it feels a little bit weird to be changing something for one property, and I'm just wondering a little bit more about how this happened and whether or not there's someone or something that's to gain from this change. Could you guys elaborate more on how this happened and who is, whether there's a benefit being derived by someone from it?
Sure, I can provide a little bit of context. So originally we actually had
Taylor, sorry, can you identify yourself?
Sure. Taylor Yates, planning board, chair of the planning board, town meeting member, precinct 2. So originally there was not only one property in this sub-district. This is also the same categorization for Pure Coat. And so when town meeting decided to not include Pure Coat in the map, we ended up with only one property with this. Where the setbacks got changed, honestly, like we actually drafted quite a bit of zoning, and we went through a lot of iterations. So the fact that we only have 2 is actually, in my opinion, pretty remarkable and speaks to like how much work we all put into that. In terms of who benefits from it, I mean, obviously the property owner at that street at that address would benefit from it.
Is that it, Chris?
Mr. Moderator, Chris Ryan.
Yes.
Director of Planning and Building. I just want to sort of add on to what the chair had just said. I think we were definitely focused on Pure Coat as sort of the primary property of interest when we were looking at District 5B. And I think we felt that a building of the size that could be built on the Pure Coat property, we weren't thinking about the underlying zoning. And in fact, the underlying zoning is actually different for the White Street property than it is for the Pure Coat property. So it was just something that was overlooked. And when we found that the White property had a different underlying zoning setback, that's when we saw that we need to make that change.
Thank you. Bob McGaugh?
Mr. Moderator, I'm willing to let 2 more people talk. Can I skip back in line?
Mr. McGaugh, you're the only remaining person between us and going to bed.
I was going to move the question, but if I have nobody behind me, I'll skip.
Thank you, Mr. McGaugh. All right. There doesn't seem to be anybody else in line. So we'll go to a vote on this motion under Article 3. All those in favor will vote yes, opposed no. I'll just say while you're voting, thank you all for your patience and tonight, and the vast majority of you, almost all of you, made your points succinctly and focused. So I think it allowed us to cover a lot. So thank you. All right, let's show the tally. A vote is 175 in favor, 2 opposed, 8 abstentions. We'll collect, can scroll it. Thank you, James.
Mr. Moderator, Ellen O'Brien Cushman, there are 2 emergency votes on this motion. Ted Dukas votes yes, and Tommy Olson votes yes.
So we'll add 2 to the plus side. So the final tally is 177 in favor, 2 opposed, and 8 abstentions. So obviously that passes. So we now have reached the end of the meeting. Thank you again. This is my 130th town meeting, and it's been a real pleasure. So thank you. Move that the special town meeting be dissolved, and I'll take unanimous consent for that. So thank you all. I guess that's it.